I still remember the first morning I set foot in the Torvald Forest. My name is Darya Kovac, and I am an environmental field researcher, though my work has always skirted the edges of obsession. I track the delicate dance of fungi and plant life in places most people would never consider visiting, and sometimes the solitude becomes almost unbearable. But this forest, it demanded it. The air was thick with moisture, every breath tinged with the sharp, earthy scent of moss and rot. The ground was a patchwork of damp pine needles and slick rocks that threatened to twist an ankle with every step. Fog lingered low, curling between the trees like hesitant spirits, softening the morning light into a pale, silvery haze. I had come here ostensibly to study the rare fungi that only grow in the shadowed hollows of Torvald's ancient trees. But there was more to my visit. Local reports mentioned hikers who vanished without a trace, whispers of strange sounds that led them astray. Some dismissed it as rumor or misadventure. Others, I suspected, were too afraid to speak aloud. I am a scientist, and science thrives on observation. Curiosity is my compass, and this forest held something no map could capture. As I set up my small camp near a creek that carved a narrow path through the thick trees, I noticed the forest seemed aware of me. The wind carried no usual chatter of birds. Instead, it was silent, interrupted only by the occasional creak of an ancient trunk swaying. Leaves rustled in patterns that did not correspond to any wind I could feel on my skin. Even the sunlight behaved strangely, refracting through the fog in odd angles that made the trees look taller, denser, more oppressive. My instincts prickled, but I told myself it was merely isolation magnifying ordinary details. By the second day, small anomalies became harder to dismiss. My compass wavered inexplicably when I was near certain clearings, spinning like it wanted me to get lost. I began hearing faint sounds, footsteps in the distance, whispers carried on the wind, but whenever I turned, there was nothing. Once, I thought I heard my own name called from deeper in the forest. My logical mind battled with the creeping unease, and I reminded myself, auditory illusions are common in dense, quiet forests. I had to focus. Still, the feeling of being watched was relentless. Even when I crouched over a patch of rare fungi, carefully noting the curvature of its gills and the moisture content of the soil, I sensed a presence lingering just beyond the limits of my vision. Shadows moved oddly, too fluidly to be natural. I began marking the trees I passed with tiny scratches, a habit to ensure I could trace my path. By midday, a pattern became apparent. The forest itself seemed to shift around me. Clearings appeared where I hadn't seen them before. Familiar landmarks felt subtly wrong. I tried to rationalize the sensations: fatigue, stress, the isolation, perhaps even mild hypothermia in the damp air. I recorded everything meticulously in my journal, noting the precise conditions, the time, the direction of the anomalies. But when I replayed my notes, a chill ran down my spine. The timing of the noises often coincided with moments I was focused elsewhere, yet I could swear the sounds mirrored my own actions. Footsteps echoing mine, whispering in rhythm with my pen scratching the page. On the third day, the forest revealed itself more aggressively. I woke to find my campsite rearranged. My supplies had been nudged. The sleeping bag was partially unrolled, the small stove pushed to the edge of the creek. Nothing was missing, nothing destroyed, but the subtle tampering screamed intent. Someone or something had been here while I slept. My rational mind insisted it must be a wild animal, a clever fox, or perhaps a curious raccoon. Yet no tracks were visible, nothing to explain the precision of the disturbance. By mid-afternoon, I decided to venture deeper, reasoning that the rare fungi I sought might grow only in the heart of the forest. The air thickened as I moved between the gnarled trunks, carrying a heavy dampness that clung to my skin and clothing. My boots sank slightly into the moss, the sound muffled, almost swallowed by the dense quiet. And then I heard it again, the softest echo of a voice, just behind me. Not a word, only a sigh. I froze, chest tight, straining to hear. When I turned, the space behind me was empty. Fear sharpened my awareness. I recalled my training in fieldwork: observe, record, anticipate. I checked my instruments. Compass steady, GPS signal weak but holding. I marked a tree with a larger scratch than another, creating a crude breadcrumb trail. Yet the feeling persisted, the sensation that something was moving in tandem with me, just outside my line of sight. It was not hunting like a predator. It was studying, learning, anticipating my every step. Nightfall arrived, and I lit a small lantern near my camp. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the tree trunks, dancing in shapes my mind resisted naming. The wind rose, carrying a scent that was not entirely forest, a faint tang of iron, perhaps blood, or maybe the sharp musk of a hidden animal. I wrapped myself in my sleeping bag, but sleep was fleeting. I dreamed of the forest shifting around me, the trees bending closer, the whispers growing louder, forming words I could almost understand. I woke with a start, heart hammering, convinced I had moved slightly while sleeping. And then I saw it, a figure crouched near the edge of the clearing, darker than the night, yet impossibly translucent, as though woven from shadow itself. I blinked. The figure vanished. My rational mind demanded evidence, yet the trace of its presence lingered. Cold air, disturbed soil, a faint metallic scent. I was not alone. Never had I felt such stark awareness of another intelligence in the wilderness. By the fourth day, paranoia was my constant companion. Every creak, every rustle of leaves, every shifting shadow carried potential menace. I began speaking aloud, calling my own name, trying to anchor myself. Occasionally the forest responded, not with words, but with echoes twisted, delayed, as if mocking me. My notebook filled with diagrams of tree positions, potential escape routes, and patterns in the disturbances. I realized that logic alone would not be enough. I rationed food and water meticulously, moved only during daylight, and kept the lantern ready. The forest seemed to respect none of my plans. Trails looped back on themselves. The whispers grew bolder. Footsteps, my own, perhaps others, echoed in impossible directions. Something was learning, shaping the environment to disorient me. The forest had become a predator, and I, prey, and yet I could not leave. Not entirely. The scientist in me, the need to observe, to understand, to document the anomalous, chained me to this nightmare. I kept moving, following the faint trails I could still discern, marking trees in increasingly desperate patterns. Somewhere in the deep woods, the source of the whispers waited, patient, intelligent, and impossibly elusive. I felt its gaze, though I could not see it, and I knew it was aware of every choice I made. As night deepened again, I held the lantern aloft, scanning the fog-choked trees. The air grew colder, the shadows denser, and then, just a whisper of movement, a flicker in the corner of my eye, I realized something I could not yet name was not just hiding. It was learning, adapting, and waiting. I had survived this long, but the forest had only just begun to test me. The fifth day dawned gray and heavy. The fog pressed close like a living thing. My muscles ached from hiking through the moss-thick undergrowth, from constantly ducking under low branches and scrambling over slick rocks. I barely slept, every creak and whisper of wind a potential threat. I had begun carrying my journal in one hand and a hatchet in the other, both tools for observation and defense, though the distinction had started to blur. I followed a narrow creek that seemed to cut deeper into the forest than any map suggested. The water gurgled over rocks, sharp and icy, carrying a faint metallic tang. My boots slipped on the wet stones, forcing me to pause repeatedly. The fog thickened around me, muting even the creek's bubbling. I began noticing patterns again. Every time I paused to examine the ground, the shadows around me seemed to shift slightly, as if the trees themselves were leaning closer, straining to see. Then I heard it, a soft laugh, low and almost human, coming from behind a tree a few meters away. My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze, gripping the hatchet tighter, listening. There was nothing, just the fog curling between the trunks. And yet, the laugh repeated, closer this time, but always vanishing when I tried to pinpoint it. It was not wind, not animal. This was deliberate, intelligent, taunting. I tried to remind myself, stay rational, Daria. You're a scientist. Collect data, observe patterns. But my pulse betrayed me, hammering in my ears louder than any distant sound. I scanned the trees carefully, looking for any sign of movement, any unnatural shadow, anything that could be a tangible form. But the forest gave nothing away. Hours passed. Every step felt heavy, deliberate. The forest's silence had become oppressive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to make a mistake. I found myself marking every tree I passed, etching tallies with the hatchet into bark so old it seemed immune to time. Even these marks felt like fragile lifelines, evidence that I was still here, still present, still resisting. Then came the first direct sign of the entity's interference. My water bottle, carefully tied to my backpack, was gone. I had left it dangling on a branch just minutes before. I scoured the area, scowling at every tree and rock, and finally found it 50 meters down the creek, standing upright on a flat stone as though someone or something had deliberately placed it there. My rational mind flinched. No human had been here. Not with the mist so thick, not with the isolation this deep in the forest. I realized then that I was being manipulated. Every sound, every shift of shadow, every disorienting turn in the trails, it was designed to push me deeper, to make me doubt my senses. And yet, even in the creeping dread, my analytical mind kicked in. If this creature, if it was a creature, was intelligent enough to manipulate the environment, I needed a strategy, a method, a way to counter its advantage. I backtracked slowly, deliberately leaving markers, doubling back over my own tracks to confuse whatever was following me. But the forest had already adapted. The shadows stretched differently. Familiar landmarks were missing or warped. I stumbled onto a hollow that seemed new, though I had passed the general area before. And then I heard it again, my own voice, calling my name. Only it wasn't me. The tone was flatter, distorted, as if whispered through layers of fog. I froze. My hands trembled on the hatchet, my throat dry. Logic screamed at me, "Do not respond." But instinct, that primal sense of danger, urged me to confront it, to test whether it could be harmed. I swung the hatchet at the nearest shadow, the fog thick enough that my blow met nothing but cold, damp air, and yet the shadow recoiled. A shiver ran down my spine. I wasn't imagining this. Whatever it was, it could interact with the physical world, even if only partially. I forced myself to keep moving, head low, senses alert. I needed shelter before nightfall, a place where I could see the forest approaching from all sides. I found a fallen tree thick enough to form a crude barricade and huddled behind it, hatchet ready, lantern casting long, trembling light. The fog pressed in, carrying faint murmurs, indecipherable, teasing. But I caught fragments, my name, whispered pleas, echoes of my own thoughts spoken aloud. It was learning not just my actions, but my fears. Night fell completely, swallowing the weak glow of my lantern. The forest seemed alive in ways I had never imagined. Leaves rustled when there was no wind, branches cracked behind me, though I had not moved. And then the unmistakable sound of footsteps, soft, deliberate, following a pattern that mirrored my own movements from hours earlier. I dared not move. I dared not breathe too loudly. The first strike came without warning. A shadow darted across the clearing, faster than any animal should be capable of moving, striking the edge of my makeshift barricade. My lantern wavered, casting the creature's form, if it could even be called that, in fleeting glimpses, dark, twisted, and indistinct, yet undeniably intelligent. Its movements were not random. They were methodical, testing, probing, calculating. I swung the hatchet again, narrowly missing it. The shadow recoiled, a sound like a faint scream escaping into the fog. My mind raced. I realized I could not fight it conventionally. I had to improvise, to exploit what I had observed. It mimicked, it studied, it reacted, but it relied on my predictable fear. If I became unpredictable, perhaps I could gain the upper hand. I bolted, not toward a trail, not toward the creek, but in a zigzag, jerking pattern I hoped it could not anticipate. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the fog swallowed us both. I could hear its whispers, distorted fragments of my own voice, chasing me through the trees. And then, a trickle of clarity. I remembered my journal, the one thing it had not manipulated. I dropped it deliberately in a clearing and ducked behind a boulder, waiting, listening. The whispers slowed. I strained to hear, holding my breath. Then silence. Minutes passed. The forest seemed to relax, almost bored. I retrieved my journal, heart pounding, and began retracing my original path, markings on the trees serving as anchors in this shifting labyrinth. Whatever had been hunting me was still here, still learning, but perhaps momentarily distracted. By dawn, I reached the edge of the creek where I had first set camp. Exhausted, shivering, I knew I had survived the immediate danger, but the forest had not released its grip. I could feel it watching, patient and persistent, waiting for the next lapse in my attention. The entity had not been defeated, only outmaneuvered. And as I packed the remnants of my camp, I realized the terrifying truth. This forest was alive in ways I could barely comprehend. It did not need to hunt me to survive. It simply needed to exist. And I, intruding into its domain, had become part of its game. I left the clearing, marking my path as best I could, but every step felt heavier than the last. The fog shifted, thickened, and in the distance, I thought I saw a figure watching me from the trees, but when I blinked, it was gone. Somewhere deep in the Torvald forest, it waits, learning, adapting, patient. And I know that one day, if I return, it will remember me. By the 6th day, I had stopped thinking in terms of simple survival. The forest had rewritten the rules, and I was learning to play a game whose moves I could barely perceive. Every sound, every shadow, every shift of the fog could be a lure. I kept my lantern close, my hatchet ready, and my journal clutched like a talisman, though I knew it offered no real protection. I moved cautiously along a familiar stretch of creek, noting each bend and tree marker I had placed. The fog hung heavier than ever, almost viscous, clinging to my skin and seeping into my lungs. I tried to take slow, measured steps, yet the sensation of being followed was relentless. My ears picked up every subtle crack of a branch, every muffled rustle, and I began to notice a pattern. The forest was guiding me, herding me toward a clearing I had not encountered before. And then I heard it, clearer than ever, my own voice calling from just beyond the tree line. "Daria," it whispered, faint and distorted. My chest tightened, heart hammering, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. Rationality had become my only weapon. I knew it was mimicking me, studying my reactions. It wanted me to respond. I would not give it the satisfaction. I pivoted, moving in the opposite direction, but immediately a figure emerged from the mist. It was taller than any human, impossibly thin, and yet shifting, dissolving, reforming as if made from shadow and fog. My hatchet felt impossibly light in my hand. The air around it pulsed with a faint metallic scent, iron, copper, or blood. I could not tell. It advanced, but not in haste. Each step deliberate, studying me as much as I studied it. Adrenaline surged. I realized I could not outrun it. I could not fight it conventionally. Logic and instinct merged. I needed to manipulate the environment as it had manipulated me. I scanned the clearing, noting the low, hanging branches, the uneven ground, the creeks and stones. Improvisation became my only path. I began a feint, moving deliberately toward a cluster of fallen trees. The entity mirrored my steps, fluid and silent. When I reached the center of the hollow, I kicked over a pile of rocks, sending them clattering down a slope. The sound echoed through the trees, drawing the figure's attention. It hesitated, a subtle pause that revealed it had expected me to behave predictably. Seizing the opportunity, I bolted through a narrow path between two moss-covered trunks, leaping over roots and rocks, ignoring my exhaustion. The entity moved like smoke behind me, always close, but always slightly delayed, as if calculating my next move. I ducked behind a boulder, pressing myself flat against the wet stone. My chest heaved, muscles screaming in protest. The forest fell silent, save for the distant gurgle of the creek. I dared not move. I could feel it circling, mimicking my breathing, testing my patience. And then I heard it, a whisper, so soft I barely recognized it as speech. "You cannot leave." I gritted my teeth. No, I would leave, and if I could not, I would survive. I remembered the pattern I had noticed days earlier. It was learning, adapting, responding to expectation. If I became unpredictable, perhaps I could escape its predictive intelligence. I dropped my journal and deliberately stomped through the undergrowth in chaotic, jerking movements, zigzagging, doubling back, ducking, and pausing unpredictably. The figure hesitated. I could sense the pause, the hesitation. It had not expected this level of unpredictability. I pressed the advantage, keeping low and weaving through the mist. My lungs burned, and my hatchet swung instinctively at low branches that threatened to obscure my path. Finally, I reached a ridge above the creek where the fog thinned slightly, giving me a brief line of sight. The clearing beyond was small, but the slope was steep. Desperate, I leapt onto a fallen log bridging the ravine, rolling as I hit the far side. The entity mirrored the motion, but I had misled it. Its form collided with a hidden root and dissipated briefly, lest lie, a low wail escaping into the mist. I did not wait to see more. I scrambled up the slope, branches clawing at my clothing and hair, and stumbled into a narrow passage I had scouted days earlier. The forest seemed different here, older, almost reverent. I paused, panting, hatchet raised, lantern flickering. The fog parted slightly, revealing faint, unnatural distortions in the trees' shapes, shadows lingering longer than they should. I had survived the immediate confrontation, but I knew the forest's intelligence had not been defeated. The entity had been outmaneuvered, temporarily distracted, but it had learned my patterns, my strengths, my weaknesses. Somewhere in the dense thicket, it was waiting, patient, observing, learning for the next encounter. I took stock of myself. Scratches on my arms, bruises forming along my legs, exhaustion clawing at my muscles. My water was nearly gone, my food rationed to scraps. Yet amidst the terror, there was clarity. Survival was possible. Improvisation, unpredictability, observation, these were my weapons. I had escaped the immediate danger, and that was victory enough. As dawn broke through the fog, I looked back at the clearing I had fled, at the twisted, silent trees that had borne witness to the encounter. I felt a creeping certainty, cold as the morning mist, that the forest would remember me. It had not wanted to kill me today. It had wanted to study, to gauge my limits. And it had learned well. I packed what supplies I could, marking my path with deliberate scratches and broken branches to ensure I could navigate back, or at least survive another encounter. The entity had not followed me beyond the immediate ridge. It was patient, cunning, and impossibly intelligent. One misstep, one lapse in vigilance, and I knew I would be drawn back into its game. I emerged from the densest portion of the Torvald forest, with the weight of knowledge heavy on my shoulders. I had survived, but the forest had not revealed all its secrets. The whispers, the shifting shadows, the intelligent, manipulative presence, they remained, lurking somewhere deep within, patient and waiting. And as I walked toward a faintly visible trailhead, I could not shake the certainty that the entity had already learned my patterns, my weaknesses, my fears. It would not forget me. One day, if I returned, or even if I strayed too deep, it would remember. The forest was not merely alive, it was awake, and I had glimpsed only a fraction of its true intelligence. I emerged from the densest part of the Torvald forest at midday, though the sun barely penetrated the thick canopy. My legs were stiff, my body slick with sweat and grime, and my lungs burned from the constant exertion. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the gurgle of the creek, the distant call of a bird, felt amplified, as if the forest itself were observing my every move. I stopped to rest against the trunk of a massive spruce, trying to gather my scattered thoughts. The events of the past days replayed in my mind with relentless clarity. The shadows that moved with intent, the whispers mimicking my own voice, the momentary glimpses of that impossible figure made of fog and darkness. Rational thought clashed with fear. I knew I had survived, yet the memory of being hunted lingered like a physical weight pressing against my chest. I opened my journal, its pages damp but intact, and traced the markings I had made on trees, the crude sketches of paths and clearings. The forest had not been random. It had patterns, subtle and cunning, almost as if it wanted me to believe I could understand it. The entity, whatever it was, had learned from me, but so had I from it. Each interaction had left traces, hints of behavior that might help me avoid future encounters. And yet, I could not shake the certainty that the forest still held secrets I would never uncover. I had glimpsed its intelligence, but the full extent was beyond comprehension. Somewhere within the dense, fog-laden trees, it still waited, patient, calculating, anticipating the next intrusion. I felt a shiver of dread as I realized I had not escaped. It had simply allowed me to leave. For now. The path out of the forest stretched ahead, faint but visible. I moved cautiously, every sense alert, noting every subtle sound and shift of shadow. The creek's water shimmered under the weak sunlight, carrying the faint metallic scent that had haunted me since the encounter. I pressed onward, aware that the forest was watching, recording, learning. As I neared the edge, the trees thinned, and for the first time in days, I could see the wider landscape beyond. Distant hills, open meadows, a ribbon of mist curling along the ground. Relief surged, though tempered by the knowledge that the danger had not vanished, only retreated. The forest had claimed nothing more than my exhaustion and my awareness of its presence. I paused at the trailhead, looking back at the dense wall of trees. The fog clung stubbornly to the shadows between trunks, almost as if it were alive, breathing. I felt an unsettling pull, an invitation, or a warning. I did not move closer. I had learned that some knowledge carries too high a price. With slow, deliberate steps, I began walking toward the distant hills, keeping the forest within my peripheral vision. Every step was measured, cautious, aware that the entity had not forgotten me. The Torvald forest remained behind me, silent yet alive, its secrets intact. I carried with me the marks, the memories, and the lingering sense of being watched. Even now, days later, I feel its presence in my mind, the whispers, the subtle distortions of perception, and the cold certainty that it is still learning, still waiting. I survived, yes, but the forest had made me its witness. And I know with a deep, unavoidable certainty that one day I will return, or it will come for me. Somewhere within those trees, the intelligence waits, patient, calculating, infinite. And I carry the knowledge that the Torvald Forest is not simply a place of solitude or study. It is a predator, and I am only one of many it has observed, tested, and allowed to escape for now. I will never forget its presence, nor the lessons it forced upon me. Survival is not only about strength or speed, but about perception, adaptation, and the willingness to improvise against a foe that defies understanding. And yet, despite the terror, a part of me knows I will return one day, not for study, not for curiosity, but because the forest and whatever dwells within has marked me, and that knowledge haunts me. My name is Captain Elias Cade, former Special Forces Recon, 41 years old, born in Trondheim, Norway. Discipline and precision had always been my strengths, but after 20 years of service, Afghanistan, Syria, missions I can't even name on paper, I was discharged with more scars than medals. Some physical, most inside. I wasn't the type to sit quietly with nightmares, so I took a private contract that promised the only thing that ever kept me sane: a challenge. That's what led me here, to the Kamchatka Peninsula in far eastern Russia, a volcanic wasteland where the ground breathes smoke and the wind tastes of salt and sulfur. The mission was simple on paper: survey an abandoned Cold War research outpost rumored to still hold classified material, possibly even bioweapon prototypes. I was supposed to confirm whether the stories were true, mark the site for extraction, and return. I told myself it was just another recon, another job. But nothing about the outpost felt like any mission I had known. The approach itself was strange. Our transport chopper flew low over endless black forests that seemed to writhe beneath the rotor wash. Pines twisted like they were trying to pull free of the earth. Snow didn't fall straight here. It spiraled, drawn sideways as if the air carried a hidden whirlpool. Even with my headset clamped tight, I swore I heard something beneath the blades. Low, rhythmic pulses, almost like a second engine. Except it wasn't. The pilot dropped me a mile out from the coordinates. No backup, no second team, just me and my gear. The client had insisted, one man. Silent, no trail. Normally, I'd be wary of such specific restrictions, but money is money. Besides, I wasn't new to walking alone into hostile ground. The cold cut sharper than I expected. Kamchatka's wind wasn't like mountain air or desert chill. It felt wet, like icy hands pressing into my ribs through the seams of my jacket. The snow beneath my boots didn't crunch the way it should. It gave with a muffled hush, as though the forest didn't want me making noise. Every step felt like an intrusion. I paused often, letting my training take over, listening for shifts in the wind, for unnatural silence. On recon, silence always means more than noise. That's when I noticed the birds, or rather, the absence of them. No cause, no distant wing beats. Not a single track in the snow except my own. For a land that should have been alive with wolves, foxes, and ravens, it was sterile. By the time the outpost came into view, my nerves were already taut. The compound was little more than 3 squat buildings, half buried in drifts, their roofs sagging under the weight of neglect. A broken radar dish jutted sideways like the snapped neck of some metallic beast. Windows were dark, glass cracked inward, edges rimmed with frost. I lowered my NVGs and scanned. No heat signatures, no movement. Still, the shadows between the structures seemed too thick, as if darkness itself had weight here. I stepped into the courtyard. The snow was oddly shallow, as though something beneath had melted it away. Steam curled up faintly, and the smell hit me, not just sulfur, but rot. It was faint, like meat left too long in a freezer burn, masked by cold but undeniable. My boots slid on a patch of ice, and for the briefest second I thought I heard something whisper. Not words, just a hiss that rose from under the ice itself, a wet sound that faded when I stilled. My pulse spiked. Years of combat had taught me to trust that instinct. Something was off. I shook it off, forced myself forward. The main lab door hung open, its hinges rusted to orange teeth. Inside, the air was warmer, almost damp. My breath no longer plumed white in front of me. I flicked my light across the room, overturned desks, broken monitors, a chalkboard covered in equations half erased by time. On the far wall, a single phrase was scratched deep into the plaster. Ani просыпаются. They are waking. The words weren't painted, not written, scratched, each line jagged as though carved by trembling hands with metal. I scanned the room again. Dust lay thick on everything, yet the words were clean, no frost clinging to their grooves. Fresh. That was the first time I felt the dread settle into my gut, not the sharp, quick fear of combat, but the slow, rolling tide of something older, heavier. I tried to center myself the way I'd been trained, slow breathing, attention to detail, cataloging every sense, the hum of wind pressing on broken glass, the faint drip of water deeper inside, the metallic tang on the back of my tongue. But no matter how I broke it down, the unease wouldn't leave. I advanced deeper into the facility. Corridors branched like veins, each one collapsing into shadow. My light beam caught peeling paint, a trail of broken vials glittering across the floor. A laboratory coat, stiff as cardboard, still clung to a skeletal frame slumped in the corner. Its jaw was locked wide, frozen in a scream that must have lasted until the very end. That's when I heard it again. The whisper. Not from outside this time, but from the dark ahead. It came in waves, as though the walls themselves exhaled. I brought my rifle up, finger against the trigger guard, and called out, voice low, controlled. Если кто-то здесь, выйдите. If someone's here, show yourself. Nothing moved, only that breath-like hiss, steady, unhurried. I could have turned back right then, radioed in that the outpost was compromised, unsafe. But I didn't, because the truth was I wasn't just here for money. I was here because something in me wanted to face whatever this place held. Maybe that's what too many years of war does to a man. You start chasing ghosts instead of avoiding them. I adjusted my grip and pressed deeper into the outpost toward the sound that seemed less like a noise and more like a calling. The further I moved down that corridor, the warmer the air became. My gloves dampened with sweat, a strange contrast to the frost still clinging to the broken windows I'd passed minutes ago. It smelled wrong, too. Not just rot anymore, but something metallic and sweet, like blood that had been cooked. My boots crunched over broken glass, though the sound was faint, muted by the oppressive hush. I swept my flashlight across a door marked in peeling Cyrillic. Biologiczny sector, biological sector. The lock had been torn away, not by rust or careful dismantling, but by brute force. The metal curled outward as though something had pressed from inside. That made my skin tighten. Force doesn't work that way. If there'd been an explosion, the door would have been blown clean off, not bent like clay. I steadied my breathing. My training whispered in my ear, "Keep calm, break it down, control what you can control." I pushed the door wider with the muzzle of my rifle and stepped inside. The lab smelled stronger, almost unbearable now. Racks of shattered vials littered the floor. A single overhead light flickered, buzzing faintly, though the power grid should have been dead decades ago. My beam landed on a glass containment unit, thick as aquarium walls, its surface frosted on the inside. At first, I thought it was empty. Then I saw the scratches, hundreds of them, overlapping like claws dragged endlessly against glass. Something had been inside. The hiss returned, stronger now, echoing in the chamber as if the walls themselves exhaled. But it wasn't random. The rhythm was deliberate. In, out. In, out. That's when I realized it wasn't breath. It was mimicry. Something was copying me. I froze. My lungs burned as I fought the urge to inhale again. And when I didn't, the hiss didn't either. It waited, patient, listening. Then, from the corner of the lab came a sound I will never forget, the faintest scrape of claw against tile, deliberate testing. I swung my rifle, light cutting through the dark. The beam caught only fragments, overturned metal tables, papers scattered like dead leaves. Nothing alive, nothing visible, but I knew better than to trust what I couldn't see. I retreated slowly toward the corridor, each step measured. My instinct screamed at me to run, but that's how you die. Panicked, loud, sloppy. Whatever was in here was intelligent, patient. It wanted me to reveal myself. Back in the hall, the air felt even warmer, suffocating, like I'd stepped into the lungs of some vast creature. My earpiece crackled faintly, though I hadn't touched the comms. No voice, just static that pulsed in the same rhythm as the hiss. My pulse quickened. If it could mimic breath, why not mimic signal? A shadow rippled at the end of the corridor. Not movement, more like the light bent wrong as if heat shimmered in the dead cold. My hand tightened on the rifle. "Show yourself," I whispered, half command, half prayer. The shimmer stilled. For a heartbeat, silence. Then came a sound that hollowed me out, my own voice repeating my words back to me. "Show yourself." Perfect cadence. Perfect tone. Except stripped of humanity, hollowed into something raw and empty. Adrenaline surged, cutting through the fear. I raised the barrel, sighted center mass where the distortion wavered, and fired. The muzzle flash seared the dark. Bullets tore into the corridor wall, concrete splintering, echo deafening. For a moment, the shimmer fractured like heat breaking on water. Then it was gone. I stood panting, rifle raised, sweat freezing on my neck. Nothing. No blood, no body. Just silence, heavier than before. My training screamed retreat. Fall back. Mark the site, call extraction, but another part of me, the part that had dragged me to Kamchatka in the first place, refused. I had to know what this thing was. I pushed deeper. Past the biological sector, down a stairwell where ice crept along the walls like veins. My flashlight shook slightly in my grip, betraying the adrenaline flooding me. The deeper I went, the louder the whispers grew. Not just one voice now, but many, layered, tangled. Some in Russian, some in English, one even in Norwegian. All of them mine. The stairwell ended at a reinforced bulkhead door, its surface warped as though from immense pressure. Painted letters above it read, Sector X. The X looked fresh, as though someone had painted it over something else. My hand hovered over the door handle. The metal radiated warmth, like flesh instead of steel. Every instinct told me not to open it, that what waited beyond wasn't meant to be touched. But instinct was exactly what had kept me alive for 20 years. And now, that same instinct whispered something different. If I turned back now, I'd never understand what this place was. I'd never silence the questions clawing at my skull. So I pulled the door open. The chamber beyond was vast, a cavern carved directly into volcanic stone. My light caught rows of glass tubes stretching into darkness, each one shattered, their contents long gone. The floor was slick with ice and something darker, frozen in jagged rivers, and in the center, half buried in frost, stood a column of organic matter. It looked almost like a tree trunk at first glance, thick, twisted, its surface scarred with claw marks. But no tree grew veins that pulsed faintly with light. No tree exhaled mist with every beat. I stepped closer. The whispers converged, louder now, pressing into my skull from every direction. I clamped my hands against my ears, but it wasn't sound. It was inside me. The column shuddered. For one awful moment, I thought it was waking. Veins brightened, mist surged, and then from directly behind me came the scrape of claws again. I spun, rifle raised, nothing. But when I turned back, the column was no longer alone. A shape had detached from its base, humanoid in silhouette, but too tall, too thin. Its surface shimmered like heat haze, bending the light, hiding itself even as I stared. Only its eyes showed, 2 points of pale fire, unblinking, fixed on me. I froze. My mind broke into its training fragments. Identify, engage, escape. But how do you engage something that isn't bound by flesh, that moves like shadow and speaks with your own voice? It stepped closer, claws scraping across stone, and in my own voice it whispered, "Elias Cade." Hearing my name hollowed me out worse than any battlefield. It didn't just know me, it was inside me. I did the only thing my body would allow. I opened fire. The roar of gunfire filled the cavern, muzzle flash lit the walls in strobe pulses. The figure staggered, shimmer breaking like water in sunlight. But it didn't fall. Bullets tore into its frame, but no blood, no flesh, just distortion, bending reality around its body. Then it spoke again. My voice, layered with others, "You cannot kill what you are." I emptied the magazine anyway, spent brass clattered to the floor. The thing didn't advance further, but it didn't retreat either. It stood there, eyes burning, mist curling from its form, and then, like smoke and wind, it was gone. I dropped the empty mag, chest heaving. My hands shook as I reloaded, sweat stinging my eyes. I swept the cavern with my light, empty. Just the pulsing column, silent now, as if nothing had stirred at all. But I knew better. It was here, watching, testing me. The cavern pressed in on me like a tomb. My breath fogged the beam of my flashlight, every exhale too loud, too revealing. I kept the rifle raised, muzzle sweeping, finger steady. Nothing moved, but I knew better than to trust stillness. Stillness in war zones was always a lie, a setup. I backed toward the bulkhead door, my boots slipping slightly on the icy floor. That's when the whispers returned, not from ahead this time, but from inside my skull. They weren't echoes of my words anymore. They were conversations. My voice, speaking things I had never said. You left them in Helmand. You pulled the trigger in Sarajevo. You ran when they screamed your name. I bit down on my teeth hard enough I thought they'd crack. Memories surged. Missions gone wrong, men lost in fire, civilians in crossfire. I had buried them deep, but here they came back raw, as if this place had cracked open the vault inside me. "Shut up," I growled, though my throat was dry. "You're nothing." The whispers laughed. My laugh. Layered and broken. Then came the sound that ripped me from paralysis, the crunch of footsteps behind me. Heavy, deliberate. Not mine. I swung around, rifle leveled. The beam caught a figure halfway formed from the mist, half human, half shimmer, like a shadow given bones. Its claws dragged against the wall, sparks flashing in the dark. Training overrode fear. I fired short, controlled bursts, not panic fire this time, targeting joints, center mass, head. The creature jerked with each impact but didn't fall. The bullets went through it like tearing through fabric, resistance but no wound. It lunged. I dove sideways, rolling across the icy floor. Its claws slammed into the ground where I'd stood, gouging stone like it was soft wood. My shoulders slammed into a broken pipe, pain flaring, but I forced myself up, rifle snapping to target. The thing turned its head toward me, too smooth, too fluid, and whispered again in my voice, "You can't outrun yourself." I retreated, step by step, muzzle never wavering. My hand brushed against something metal, the frame of a storage crate. That gave me an idea. I flicked the flashlight across the chamber, searching. Dozens of pipes lined the ceiling, many split open, venting faint steam. The heat was volcanic. Pressure systems. If I could use them... The creature lunged again, faster this time. I fired, rounds sparking against walls. I ducked behind a shattered containment tube and yanked my knife free with my offhand. The rifle might slow it, but if it was part flesh, part energy, maybe steel could bite where bullets failed. It came over the tube like liquid shadow, claws arcing down. I slashed upwards, steel meeting distortion. Splash, for the briefest instant, resistance, the blade cutting through mist like slicing cloth. The creature shrieked, soundless yet deafening, and reeled back. Its eyes flared brighter, pale fire burning. So it could be hurt. Not killed, maybe, but hurt. I pressed the attack, driving the knife again, forcing it back step by step. My breath roared in my ears. Every muscle screamed, but then its form fractured. For a second, there were 2 of them, then 3. All of them me. My height, my build, my face shifting in and out of the haze. I froze. Which one was real? Which was shadow? They spoke together, voices layered. You don't know who you are. One rushed forward. My instincts screamed to fire, but which one? If I chose wrong, I'd waste ammo. I waited until the last second, then dropped low. The claws whistled above my skull. I drove the knife upward into its chest. The blade sank halfway, resistance like thick tar. The figure convulsed, then evaporated into smoke. The others melted away too, leaving only the mist and my ragged breathing. I staggered back against the pulsing column. The veins in its surface glowed faintly, heartbeat rhythm. Each pulse seemed to sync with mine, faster, harder, as if the thing inside me was aligning with it. That's when I understood. The danger wasn't just outside. It was trying to become me. I couldn't win a war of attrition. If I stayed, it would strip me piece by piece until I was nothing but one of its whispers. My only chance was to cripple the environment, force it to retreat. I scanned the ceiling again. Those pipes. Steam vents. Pressure. Volcanic heat below. Decision made, I slung the rifle, grabbed my pack, and pulled out C4. I'd only brought enough for demolition markers, not full collapse, but it would have to do. I slapped charges against the largest pipes I could reach, hands working fast despite the tremor in them. Behind me, the hiss thickened. Not one voice now, hundreds, all mine. They screamed, they begged, they laughed. Some cried in languages I hadn't spoken in years. Elias, Elias, Elias. I ignored it, fingers steady on the detonator. Discipline, focus. Mission first. A shape rushed from the mist. I triggered the detonator. The explosion shook the chamber. Fire tore through pipes. Steam vented in blinding bursts. The cavern filled with scalding mist, the sound of metal shrieking as pressure ripped it apart. The creature screamed, or maybe I screamed. The distortion convulsed in the steam, eyes flaring and then vanishing. The column shuddered violently, its veins rupturing, spraying dark fluid across the ice. I didn't wait to see more. I ran. Through the bulkhead, up the stairwell, lungs seared by steam and sulfur. My boots slipped, but I pushed harder. Behind me, the cavern roared like a living thing. The whispers chased, but weaker now, fading under the howl of ruptured pipes. At last I burst into the upper corridor, half collapsing against the wall. My chest heaved, air burning. But it was quiet. For the first time since I'd entered, truly quiet. I should have felt relief. Instead, dread sank deeper. Because in that silence, I realized something chilling. The whispers weren't gone. They were inside me now. Quiet. Patient. Waiting. I leaned against the corridor wall, my rifle heavy in my hands, sweat freezing along my jaw despite the heat rolling from below. The silence pressed into me like weight. No whispers. No scraping claws. Just the faint drip of water somewhere in the bowels of the outpost. But silence wasn't safety. Silence was waiting. I checked my gear with trembling hands. 2 mags left, 1 knife. Minimal explosives spent. My breathing was shallow but controlled. I forced it that way. Panic was the enemy. Precision was survival. I pushed forward, deeper into the upper halls. The outpost wasn't large, but the corridors twisted in ways that didn't match the exterior. I'd memorized the layout from satellite recon before deploying, yet as I advanced, the halls bent differently, as if the building had shifted while I was underground. I turned left where there should have been a storage wing and found another stairwell leading down. My gut clenched. I'd been here before. This was the same stairwell I'd climbed minutes ago. I was sure of it. "No," I muttered. "Keep your head, Cade." But the whispers stirred again. My own voice in my ears. "You'll never leave." I gritted my teeth and pressed on. Down the stairs, through another corridor, into another lab. Same broken vials, same stiff corpse slumped in the corner. Except now, the body was wearing my dog tags. I staggered back, rifle rising on instinct. My name glinted from the metal. Elias Cade. Same scratches on the plaster wall. Ani prosipautsa. They are waking. My breath quickened. No. It was a trick. Hallucination. Environmental effect combined with stress. But my hands shook when I reached for the tags, and they felt real. Cold. Heavy. The lights flickered. The corpse's jaw shifted with a creak. Its mouth moved soundlessly, then snapped wide in a silent scream. I fired without thinking. Bullets tore the skeleton apart, bone and cloth scattering across the lab. When the smoke cleared, the tags were gone. My knees nearly buckled. The place wasn't just copying my voice, it was copying me. I forced myself back into motion, because standing still meant surrender. I retraced steps, or tried to, but every corridor bent differently now. The outpost was folding me into itself, a maze designed not to keep me out, but to keep me in. And then the lights died completely. Darkness swallowed me. My flashlight beam cut only a few meters ahead, the air thick with frost and steam. That's when I heard it again, the scrape of claws, close this time. I spun. The beam caught nothing but peeling paint. Another scrape, to the left, another behind. Surrounding me, I raised my rifle, back against the wall, breath controlled. Shapes moved in the dark, shadows bending, stretching, too many to count. Then one stepped into the beam, my height, my face. But wrong. Its skin shimmered, eyes glowing pale, mouth twisting into a grin I knew I'd never made. "Elias," it said in my exact voice. "Come home." The others followed, peeling out of the dark. Dozens of me, some in full gear, some in tattered uniforms from wars I hadn't fought in years, one even in civilian clothes I'd worn before deployment. All of them smiling with mouths too wide. I opened fire, a storm of bullets shredding shadows, figures flickered, twisted, fell apart. But more replaced them. Every time one vanished, two more stepped out. My rifle kicked empty, bolt locking back. I slammed in my last mag, hands shaking. "Stay calm. Stay alive." I whispered it like a mantra. The nearest copy rushed me, claws slashing. I dropped low, drove the knife upward. Steel cut through mist, splitting its chest. It collapsed in smoke, but another lunged, then another. I fought with blade and rifle butt, muscles burning, every motion a desperate dance between instinct and terror. Claws raked my arm. Pain lanced white-hot, blood soaking my sleeve. I screamed, slashed blindly, and felt the knife tear through something solid. Another figure collapsed, but they didn't stop. They swarmed, my own face staring back at me from a dozen grins, eyes alight with pale fire. That's when I realized the truth. They weren't copies. They were futures. Versions of me the outpost wanted to make. Each one broken, consumed, another Elias trapped in endless echo. "No," I snarled, forcing myself upright. "You don't own me." I shoved through them, knife cutting, boots slipping in blood and frost. My flashlight beam swung wildly, catching glimpses of corridors that twisted like throats, doors that led nowhere, walls breathing with mist. I ran. The whispers screamed behind me, hundreds of my voices tangled into one roar. Claws scraped concrete, chasing. I slammed through a warped door into what had once been a control room. Panels lay shattered, dials frozen mid-turn, and on the far wall, a window. Frosted, cracked, but real. Beyond it, the storm. Night sky. Escape. I rushed forward, slammed the rifle stock into the glass. Cracks spidered. I struck again and again. The whispers closed in, claw steps echoing closer. The window burst outward in a spray of shards. I climbed through, boots crunching on ice, and felt the night air blast against my face. Cold. Pure. Free. But as I stumbled into the courtyard, snow swirling around me, the whispers didn't fade. They came with me. Every breath of wind carried them. Every shadow between broken buildings shifted with my silhouette. I wasn't free. I'd only brought it outside, and somewhere behind me, deep in the outpost, I heard the column pulse once more. Louder, stronger, as though my escape had only fed it. I staggered toward the tree line, lungs burning, blood freezing against my sleeve. My legs shook, but I forced them on. I needed distance. I needed sky above me and earth beneath me, not those walls. The forest waited, black and endless. Every trunk twisted like ribs. Snow swallowed my steps. The whispers followed, patient and quiet now, threading through the pines. I didn't dare stop. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The forest swallowed me whole. Pines loomed like jagged spear, trunks twisted by years of cold and volcanic soil. My breath came ragged, every inhale burning with the taste of ash. Snow muffled my footsteps, but I knew silence meant nothing. The whispers threaded through the trees, carried on the wind. I kept my rifle at the ready, knife sheathed at my thigh, though part of me knew weapons meant little against what stalked me. Still, tools gave focus. Focus gave survival. The deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. Pines bent inward over the trail, their branches knit together like ribs. The snow here wasn't white. It gleamed faintly blue, as if lit from beneath. My boots sank without crunch, the ground too soft, too forgiving. Every few steps, I checked my compass. The needle spun wildly, twitching as if caught in unseen current. East, west, north, meaningless. Kamchatka had always been a land of shifting earth and magnetic anomalies, but this was deliberate. It wanted me lost. I forced myself to keep moving in one direction, using the tree line as my guide. My training whispered, pick a point, hold it, don't waver. But every time I looked up, the trees had shifted. The landmark pine I'd chosen moments before was gone, replaced by another trunk identical to the last. The whispers returned, not loud this time, soft, woven into the rustle of branches. My own voice, calm, coaxing. Rest, Elias, just stop. You're tired, lay down. The snow is warm. I gritted my teeth, focused on the burn in my lungs, the weight of my pack, the ache in my wounded arm. Pain was real. The rest was illusion. But then the forest began to change. I spotted shapes between the trees, figures moving with my stride. Shadows at first, but then clearer. Me again. Dozens of me, marching parallel, each one flickering between soldier and shadow. They didn't make sound, didn't break snow. They only stared with those pale fire eyes. I raised my rifle, sighted one in the beam. The copy moved exactly as I did, muzzle to muzzle, motion for motion. I fired. The round tore through it, exploding bark behind. The figure didn't fall, it just grinned and whispered, "You can't shoot yourself away." I cursed under my breath and kept moving. My head spun. My throat was raw from breathing steam and smoke. But if I stopped, I knew they'd close in. Then I saw it. Light through the trees. Not pale moonlight, but firelight. A camp. I stumbled toward it, desperate, my legs near collapse. The clearing opened wide, snowless, the ground black and warm like volcanic rock. In the center burned a bonfire, flames unnaturally tall, sparks carried into the storm sky. Around the fire sat more of them. Dozens of Elias Cades, some in uniforms from missions I remembered, some in gear I'd never worn, as if taken from futures not yet lived. One wore the same civilian coat I'd abandoned in Trondheim years ago. They all turned as I entered the clearing. Dozens of me, faces half-lit, grins stretching wide. The fire roared higher. The heat singed my face. I raised the rifle, finger white on the trigger. "Stay back," I barked, though my voice cracked. They laughed, all at once. My laugh multiplied until it filled the clearing like thunder. One of them stood. He was me, older, gaunter, eyes hollow with pale fire. He stepped forward, no weapon in his hands, only open palms. "You can't fight it," he said in my exact voice. "You are already part of it." "I'm not," I spat, though my voice shook. The copy tilted his head. "Then why do we all remember what you buried? Why do we know every scream you silenced?" The fire surged, shadows twisting across the clearing. The other figures rose, circling, their movements perfectly mirrored. I turned, rifle sweeping, trying to hold them all at bay. But there were too many. The older version stepped closer, close enough that I could see the veins glowing faintly beneath his skin, just like the column in the cavern. This is where you end, Elias. With us. Forever. My mind fractured between instinct and terror. Run, fight, nothing seemed enough. And then my training whispered the simplest truth. If you can't kill it, deny it. I swung the rifle toward the fire. The copies lunged, voices screaming my name. I fired into the flames. The bonfire erupted, sparks blinding, heat blasting outward. The ground bucked like a living thing. Figures shrieked, distorted, their forms flickering. I dove sideways as claws slashed through where I'd stood. My shoulder slammed into stone, pain jolting white-hot, but I pushed up, knife in hand. One of the copies rushed me. I drove the blade into its chest. It convulsed, eyes flaring, then burst into smoke. Another grabbed my arm, claws digging into muscle. I screamed, twisted, and stabbed again. More smoke. The fire burned out in an instant, snuffed like a candle. Darkness swallowed the clearing. Only the pale eyes of the remaining copies glowed in the black. I staggered back, chest heaving, knife slick with shadow. My rifle was empty, useless. My body screamed with exhaustion. The older version stepped forward again, unharmed, his grin wider now. "You can't kill fire with fire," he whispered. "And you can't kill us." The circle closed. Claws scraped closer. Whispers surged in my skull until I couldn't tell if I was screaming aloud or only inside. And then the ground beneath the clearing split open. A tremor roared through the forest. Snow cascaded from branches. The soil cracked, glowing with faint orange light from magma far below. The circle of copies staggered, forms flickering. I saw my only chance. I ran, leaping across fissures, stumbling over roots, tearing through the forest. The whispers howled behind me, some fading, some chasing. Branches whipped my face, snow burned in my lungs, my boots slipped, but I never stopped. At last, the trees broke, and I saw the ridge ahead. High ground. A way out. But as I climbed, clawing through snow and stone, I knew the truth. I wasn't escaping. Not really, because the whispers didn't fade. They had followed me out of the outpost, out of the cavern, out of the fire. They were inside me now. Every step I took, every breath I drew, they echoed, patient, watching, waiting. And as I reached the ridge and looked out over the endless black forest, I understood the final horror. It wasn't the outpost that had been the prison. It was me. The ridge wind cut hard against my face, sharp as broken glass. From up here, I could see the forest stretching endless in every direction, black spires of pine writhing in the storm. Beyond, nothing but the volcanic horizon, mountains belching smoke into the night sky. Kamchatka had always been a hostile land, but now it felt worse, alive. I dropped to one knee, sucking in the cold, my arms where the claws had raked me, blood seeping sluggish beneath frozen fabric. Every breath rattled like gravel. Yet the whispers didn't let me collapse. They followed with perfect calm, threading through my thoughts. "Keep moving, Elias. You can't stop here. Go back. Finish what you started." I pressed my palms against my ears as if that could stop them. But the sound wasn't in the air. It was in me. Every whisper carried weight, as though each word rewrote a small piece of who I was. My hand brushed my chest without meaning to. My dog tags were gone, but the cold imprint of them still seemed to rest against my skin. That corpse in the lab, wearing them. Was that me already? Or me becoming? The storm above deepened. Lightning forked across the horizon, pale against the volcanic plumes. The forest below seemed to shift in the flash, trees moving not with the wind, but with intent, as if the whole land had become one vast organism, and I was just a splinter in its skin. I had to move. Sitting here meant surrender. I staggered down the far side of the ridge, boots sliding in loose shale. The terrain grew unstable, rock crumbling into black gashes that steamed with volcanic breath. Heat rose in waves, clinging to my face, and the smell of sulfur burned in my throat. Every step forward, the whispers adjusted. Not taunting now, guiding. "Left, Elias. Don't step there. Keep low." And damn me, part of me obeyed. Because the moment I ignored them, the ground beneath me cracked, stone giving way to molten glow. I barely leapt back in time. It wanted me alive, not dead. Alive long enough for what? Assimilation? Transformation? A silhouette appeared on the next ridge. At first, I thought it was another tree twisted against the storm. But then it moved. Smooth. deliberate, human in outline. Me. The copy stood still, watching. Its eyes burned pale fire, visible even from this distance. I raised my rifle, though I knew the mag was nearly empty. My finger hesitated on the trigger. Too far for a clean shot anyway. The copy didn't move. It only raised a hand, beckoning. I shouted into the storm, voice ragged, "What do you want from me?" The wind carried the answer back, in my own voice. "To finish." The figure turned and walked into the trees. Against all reason, I followed. The forest closed around me again, branches clawing at my gear. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Not dozens now. Hundreds, a chorus of every version of my voice, some whispering, some screaming, my name over and over until it lost all meaning. I stumbled into another clearing. This one smaller, encircled by basalt rock, the ground bare of snow. At its center was a fissure in the earth, glowing faint orange, heat rolling upward. And standing at the edge, waiting, was the copy. Up close, it was worse. My face exactly, down to the scar under my eye, but skin too smooth, too pale, veins glowing faintly beneath. When it smiled, the expression felt like a mockery, like it was still learning how. "You're tired," it said. My voice, "Lay it down, you've done enough." I raised the rifle, but my arms trembled. Not just from exhaustion, from doubt. Because staring into that face, I couldn't shake the thought, maybe it was right, maybe all I'd done was run. Maybe this was where it always ended. "Why me?" I forced out. My throat felt raw, its grin widened. "Because you survive. Again and again, that makes you valuable." It stepped closer, pale fire eyes burning. "We are waking. You will help us." I fired. The round cracked the air, striking its chest. The figure staggered, but didn't fall. Smoke curled from the wound, and the flesh knitted itself whole before my eyes. "You can't kill me," it whispered. "I am you." It lunged. I barely dodged, rolling across basalt as claws tore stone behind me. Heat seared my palms. I scrambled up, knife in hand, slashing wildly. The blade bit, ripping through mist flesh. The thing shrieked, convulsing, but still came on. We crashed together, my knife buried in its shoulder, its claws raking across my ribs. Pain flared white hot. My knees buckled, but I drove forward, shoving both of us toward the fissure. The heat scorched my face, sweat boiling on my skin. The copy snarled with my voice, low and guttural, "If you fall, we all fall." Then, "We fall together," I spat. At the last moment, I tore the knife free and shoved it deep into its chest. With every ounce of strength left, I kicked hard, sending the figure staggering into the fissure. It screamed, not my voice this time, but something older, deeper. The sound rattled the clearing, shook the trees. Flames roared upward as the figure dissolved into shadow, sucked into the earth. I collapsed to my knees, chest heaving, vision spinning. For a moment, silence. Blessed silence. Then the whispers returned. Not loud, not screaming, just one voice. "You didn't win." I clutched the knife, knuckles white. My breath came shallow, my body broken. I looked into the fissure. Nothing but firelight below, shifting shadows on the walls. The copy was gone, but its words lingered, and deep inside I felt it, like an ember left smoldering in my chest. It wasn't finished. I stayed kneeling at the fissure for what felt like hours, the heat crawling up from below, sweat stinging my eyes. My knife trembled in my hand, slick with shadow that no longer smoked but clung to the blade like tar. My body screamed at me to move, to get away before the ground split further, but the whispers pinned me in place. Not a chorus this time, not screams, just one. Steady voice. My voice. "You're still here, Elias." I forced myself upright, legs shaking. Every step back from the fissure felt like wading through mud. The forest beyond the basalt clearing swayed, though no wind touched it. Branches angled inward like the trees were listening. I stumbled into the tree line, each breath ragged, and pressed forward. The snow returned in patches, glowing faint blue as before. My boots left tracks this time, though when I glanced back, they were gone, filled in as if the land had healed itself. I needed out. Extraction point was a mile west, if west even meant anything here anymore. My compass spun, still useless, but the sky had cleared in places, stars burning pale above. I picked the North Star and set it in my vision like a lifeline. One step, another. Keep moving. That was all that mattered. But the forest wasn't done. Shapes drifted between the trees, familiar shapes. At first, just glimpses, flashes of pale eyes, the curve of my jawline, then clearer. Whole figures stepping into view, walking parallel to me. They didn't attack this time, they just walked. A silent escort. I tried not to look at them, but the longer they followed, the harder it became to ignore. One wore gear from Helmand, the same dust-stained uniform I'd sweated in 12 years ago. Another carried scars I hadn't earned yet. One even looked older, beard white, eyes sunken. All of them me. My throat tightened. I wanted to shout to break the silence, but I knew what would happen. They'd answer back with my own words, twisted hollow. So I kept walking. When the ridge finally broke and the forest gave way to a wide, frozen plain, I thought, just for a moment, that I'd made it. Snow stretched flat, glinting silver beneath the stars. Beyond it, black cliffs dropped into the sea. If I reached the coastline, maybe I could find signal. Maybe the sat phone in my pack would finally connect. I stepped onto the plain. The snow felt wrong immediately. Spongy, almost breathing. My boots sank deeper than they should. I pushed harder, each stride an effort. The escort of shadows remained at the tree line, watching but not following. Halfway across, the whispers returned in force. Not just in my skull this time. In the snow. The sound vibrated through my boots, humming up my bones. My name repeated over and over, muffled but relentless. Elias, Elias, Elias. I broke into a run. My legs burned, lungs tore, blood pulsed at my temples. The coastline loomed closer, just another 100 yards. The ground cracked. Snow fell away beneath me, and I plunged waist deep into slush that wasn't water. It clung, thick and warm, writhing like flesh. I screamed, dragging myself forward, boots tearing free with sickening suction. The whispers grew deafening. My name howled from below. I staggered onto solid ground again, collapsing face first in snow that burned against my skin. My hands shook as I crawled the last few feet to the cliff edge. The sea crashed below, black waves striking against volcanic stone. For a moment, relief cut through terror. The ocean was real. Vast, empty. Something not shaped by the outpost. I pulled the sat phone from my pack, fingers fumbling with frozen latches. The screen flickered to life, searching for signal. My heart hammered. This was it. The display blinked. Connected. I raised it to my ear, almost sobbing. This is Captain Elias Kade, Kamchatka coordinates, outpost compromised, request immediate evac. Static. Then a voice. My voice. We hear you, Elias. We're coming. The phone slipped from my hand, clattering against the rock. I stared at it, my reflection warped in the screen. Pale eyes glowed faintly in my face where none had before. I staggered back from the cliff edge. Knife clutched tight. The sea roared below, endless, uncaring. Behind me, the forest waited, the escort of shadows still watching. The fisher's heat seemed to pulse beneath the ground, even here. There was no escape. Not really. The whispers weren't outside anymore, they were inside, breathing with me, thinking with me. And as I stood there on the edge of the world, torn between sea and forest, earth and fire, I realized the final truth. I hadn't survived the outpost. I had brought it with me. The sat phone crackled again, louder this time. My voice echoed from it, dozens of tones at once, layered like a choir. Elias Kade, you are ready. I dropped the knife without meaning to. My fingers wouldn't close around it anymore. My breath misted in the air, but even that wasn't mine. It echoed back seconds later in perfect mimicry, as though the world itself was breathing me. I looked into the ocean, into the black horizon. Somewhere deep below, something stirred. The water didn't move like waves. It pulsed like veins in the earth. And the pale glow that had haunted me in the cavern now burned faint across the sea's surface. They were waking. I stepped back once, twice, knife forgotten, rifle useless, sat phone still whispering. My body trembled, but not from fear, from resonance. The outpost hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning. And I, whether I wanted it or not, was part of it now. The sat phone wouldn't stop. Static hissed, then layered voices, my voices, spilled out in a tide. Some shouted, some begged, some whispered calmly like lullabies I never remembered learning. All of them me. I staggered from the cliff edge, unable to tear my gaze from the sea. The black water moved unnaturally, not with waves, but with pulses, as though the entire ocean was one vast heart. Each throb sent faint across its surface, pale, sickly, the same glow I'd seen at a cavern's column, the same fire in the eyes of my copies. The wind caught my hood and whipped it back. The cold should have stung, but I barely felt it anymore. My body didn't feel entirely mine. My fingers flexed without command. My lungs breathed in rhythm with the sea. Elias! The voices from the sat phone called. Elias, the whispers in the snow echoed. Elias, the ocean itself sighed. I wanted to scream. Instead, I laughed. My laugh, raw and broken. The sound carried into the storm and came back multiplied. The forest behind me shifted. Pale eyes bloomed in the tree line. Dozens, then hundreds. All the copies stood waiting, watching, not advancing. They didn't need to. They knew. I turned back toward the cliff. The sea pulsed brighter now, veins of light stretching further each moment as if something vast below stirred awake. The ground beneath my boots vibrated. My wounds no longer bled. They glowed faintly, veins beneath skin echoing the same light. I understood then. The outpost hadn't created this. It had only contained it, barely, long enough for the world to forget. And I, fool, soldier, survivor, had broken that seal. I looked down at the sat phone, still hissing, still calling in my voice. We are ready. Come home. I picked it up. My reflection stared back at me in the cracked screen. But the eyes weren't mine anymore. Pale fire burned there, steady, eternal. For one last desperate moment, I tried to remember who I was before all this. Captain Elias Cade, recon soldier, child of Trondheim, fighter, survivor. The man who had outlived war zones and nightmares. But the memory was already fading. A sound rose from the sea. Not a roar, not a scream. Something older. A hum so deep it shook marrow. The horizon bulged upward, water lifting as if something enormous pressed from beneath. The pale glow spread across the waves until the whole ocean shimmered like liquid glass. My legs carried me forward without command. One step, another, toward the cliff edge. The sat phone pressed tight to my ear. The voices whispered in perfect unison, "You survived, Elias. Now you belong." I tried to resist. I planted my boots against the stone, clenched my fists, forced air through clenched teeth. But my body betrayed me. Muscles moving as though commanded by something deeper than thought. I reached the cliff edge. The sea below opened like a mouth, black waves pulling apart to reveal chasms of light. Something vast moved beneath, bigger than ships, than cities. Shapes I couldn't comprehend coiled in the depths, glowing veins stretched endless. The forest copies drew closer now, circling the cliff behind me. I didn't need to look. I felt them, every one of them breathing in sync with me, or maybe I was breathing in sync with them. The sat phone hissed one final phrase, "Jump," and my legs obeyed. I fell forward into the black. The wind tore the scream from my throat, though I couldn't tell if I was screaming or laughing anymore. The sea surged up to meet me, glowing veins spreading like arms. The last thing I saw before the water swallowed me whole was the reflection of my own face. Not pale, not twisted, but calm, smiling. Then the ocean closed, darkness, and the whispers, louder than ever, filling me until there was no difference between them and me. My name is Ilara Kostova, and I am a forensic pathologist. I specialize in unraveling the stories that bodies whisper after death, a profession that has made me both meticulous and, admittedly, a little obsessive. People often describe me as introverted, prone to overthinking, but I prefer to think of it as paying attention. It was precisely this attention to detail that brought me to the Zelenka Forest, a place most locals avoided after sunset. The forest sits in the folds of an old mountain range in Eastern Europe. It's dense and unwelcoming, with trees so thick their branches weave together high above, forming a ceiling of shadow even in midday. A heavy mist clings to the valley floor, so dense in some areas that it muffles every sound and warps distance. I could smell the damp earth, pine resin, and a faint undertone of decay, something older than rot, something that seemed to belong to the place itself. My boots sank slightly into the mossy ground as I walked, the only sounds my careful steps and the occasional snap of a branch behind me, though I knew I was alone. At least, I thought I was. I came here under the pretext of investigating a string of unexplained deaths, 3 in the last 6 weeks, all found in the forest, all with no apparent cause. The local authorities called it mysterious, though their faces betrayed disbelief. But I had learned long ago not to trust appearances. Death doesn't lie. Humans do, and sometimes what kills isn't human at all. The first sign that something was wrong arrived almost immediately. I was examining a narrow, winding trail that led to a clearing where the last body had been found. The mist hung low, curling around my ankles like slow fingers. As I walked, I noticed the trees, old oaks, spruces, and pines, were unnaturally silent. No birds sang, no squirrels chattered, no insects hummed. The silence itself felt deliberate, oppressive, like the forest was holding its breath, waiting. I shook the thought off. My mind is trained to notice anomalies, not to imagine ghosts. Yet, I couldn't help but notice a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Shadows that seemed to twitch just beyond my vision, shapes that didn't belong. I found myself constantly turning in my head, scanning the dense foliage, even though reason told me it was nothing. By midday, the mist had thickened and the light dimmed to a muted gray. I found the clearing, its ground carpeted in fallen needles and rotting leaves. The air was heavier here, damp and cold, and there was a faint metallic tang, like rusted iron, or perhaps blood. My professional instinct prickled. I stepped carefully, examining the ground for tracks. Footprints, dragged leaves, something unusual. The leaves were displaced in a pattern that didn't make sense, almost as if someone or something had walked backwards for a stretch, or had slipped and recovered in a way that defied logic. I crouched and touched one of the prints. The soil was soft, recently disturbed, and warm. My heart rate picked up. Not alarm, exactly, but a professional curiosity tinged with unease. It's rare for bodies to be found here, and rarer still for signs of struggle to be so subtle. Whoever or whatever had been here was careful, intelligent, calculated. As I traced the prints, I thought I heard something, a soft rustling, not in the underbrush, but above, high in the trees. My eyes darted upward. At first I saw nothing. Then, from the corner of my vision, a figure moved between 2 oaks. Pale, indistinct, human-shaped, but impossible to see clearly. I blinked. It was gone. My rational mind dismissed it as a trick of light, a shadow shaped by the mist. Yet the sensation of being watched persisted, crawling along my spine. I set up my small field kit on a fallen log and began documenting the clearing. My gloves brushed against moss that felt wet, almost slippery, yet there was no rain, no dew. The air itself seemed to pulse, thick with tension. I noted the irregularities, footprints that ended abruptly, areas of flattened vegetation that didn't match any human or animal pattern. Something had been here recently. Something clever. I felt the first real pang of fear when I thought I heard my name. A whisper, soft and distant, carried through the mist. Alara. I froze, heart hammering. My rational mind screamed that it was impossible, that the forest could not speak, and yet the tone, the cadence, was unmistakably human. It wasn't coming from any direction, at least not any I could pinpoint. The hairs on my arms rose, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Fieldwork in isolation often comes with mental fatigue, but this felt different, personal, intentional. I packed up quickly, trying to shake the unease as I retraced my steps along the trail. That's when I noticed something new, prints alongside mine. They were smaller, lighter, almost imperceptible, and followed the same path I had just taken. I stopped, my pulse spiking. Whoever had followed me was careful, matching my pace, keeping just beyond the fog's veil. I reached a narrow creek that cut through the forest. The water was cold and clear, its surface reflecting the dim gray sky above. I knelt to drink, hoping the simple act of grounding myself might shake the tension. But the water's reflection showed not just my face, but something behind me, pale, blurred, moving in ways my mind rejected as possible. I spun around. Nothing, just the trees. I knew then with a sinking certainty that I was no longer alone. Whatever was in the forest, it was aware of me, observing, learning. I forced my breathing to slow, my hands steady. Panic would be lethal here. In my line of work, logic and observation are survival. I began to whisper my own notes aloud, as if the voice of analysis could anchor me against fear. Footprints, impressions, directionality, anomalies, record everything. But even as I cataloged, the feeling intensified. Eyes, or something like eyes, following every movement. Shadows twitching unnaturally at the edge of sight. The forest had become a living trap. By late afternoon, the mist thickened further, reducing visibility to barely 10 meters. The forest felt alien, transformed. Twisted trunks, roots rising like skeletal fingers, shadows that seemed to move independently. I stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin, wooden and rotting, partially swallowed by ivy. Curiosity and survival instinct combined, I needed a vantage point, somewhere to observe without being fully exposed. The cabin's interior was empty, but reeked of damp decay, the walls crawling with mold. A small table held remnants of old paper, water-stained and unreadable. Then I heard it again. Alara. This time closer, more deliberate. Not a trick of wind, not a reflection of my own imagination. Something wanted me to hear it. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to calm my racing thoughts. My mind, trained for methodical examination, now scrambled to anticipate an adversary I could not see. The forest was no longer a passive environment. It had become a predator, and I was the prey. I stayed in the cabin until the light began to fade, though fading hardly describes it. The mist thickened to the point where daylight seemed to dim into perpetual gray. I could barely see a few feet beyond the doorway. My instincts screamed to leave, but something told me I would learn nothing by running blindly. Survival isn't about fleeing, it's about understanding what you're up against. I unpacked my small camera and began documenting everything, taking detailed notes in my field journal. The patterns of the forest, the strange footprints, the irregularities in plant growth, these were data. But as I worked, I felt a presence close, almost touching, yet I could see nothing. Then it happened, a sound. Not a snap or a rustle, but a soft, deliberate tap against the cabin wall. Tap, tap. I froze. My professional curiosity battled with primal fear. The tapping was deliberate, intelligent, rhythmic, and it was coming from all around me. Not random, calculated. Whoever or whatever was outside knew I was here. My pulse hammered. I had to remind myself to think. I whispered notes to myself, documenting each sound, each shadow. The rational part of me demanded analysis. Tap patterns suggested movement around the cabin's perimeter, perhaps pacing. Tap, pause, tap, pause. Almost like it was counting or mimicking some rhythm. But why? Intelligence. This was not a simple predator. This was something that could reason, or at least mimic reasoning. I needed a plan. I considered leaving immediately, but the forest in the gray mist was a maze and I had no clear path. Besides, panic would make me sloppy. I decided to barricade the cabin door with the heavy wooden table, keeping my hands free and my senses sharp. I also dug out a small but sturdy hunting knife from my pack, its weight reassuring in my palm. Then I heard it, a whisper from the shadows inside the cabin. I froze. My name, again, but closer this time. Alara. I spun around. Nothing. Only the dim outline of the room and the shadows that seemed unnaturally long curling along the walls. But I could feel it. Something had moved behind me. My training as a forensic pathologist teaches me to look for inconsistencies, for evidence of motion or intrusion. And yet, I found nothing. No footprints in the dust, no disturbed items, nothing that could indicate movement. My mind raced. Could I be imagining it? Fatigue can play cruel tricks, but every instinct screamed that I was not alone. I decided to leave the cabin, but not without a strategy. I checked my journal, reviewing my notes, footprints ending abruptly, impressions in the moss that didn't match any natural gait, shadows that seemed to move independently of light, and now this. Whatever this was, it had intelligence. It could study me, mimic me, anticipate me. I stepped outside, careful, listening. The mist wrapped around me like cold silk. The forest floor was soft underfoot, but I noticed something peculiar. Parallel prints alongside mine, perfectly matching my path, but always a few steps behind. Someone or something was following me, copying me. I forced myself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help. My mind sought patterns. If the prints mirrored mine, perhaps I could use them to predict the entity's movements. I led myself deeper into the trees, taking a path that twisted sharply, doubled back, trying to confuse my pursuer. Yet every few steps I would glance back, and there they were, always behind, always precise. By the time I reached a small clearing, I realized the intelligence of the entity was terrifying. It wasn't just following. It was studying me, learning how I moved, waiting for mistakes. My skin prickled with awareness. I could feel its gaze without seeing it. And then I heard another sound, this time unmistakably human. A soft exhalation, almost a sigh. I froze mid-step. My knife felt heavier than ever. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against my lungs. I could see shapes moving in the mist now, too fleeting to identify. But the movements were deliberate, almost playful. It was toying with me. The realization hit hard. I was not just being hunted. I was being observed, tested. I remembered something from one of the death reports. The bodies had been found in positions suggesting disorientation, confusion, even terror. No wounds, no signs of struggle, but something had been inside their minds, guiding them. I felt the first real stab of fear, a raw, unshakable understanding. This entity doesn't need to attack physically. Its power is psychological. It can manipulate perception, induce doubt, and drive prey into mistakes. I turned abruptly, scanning the misty tree line. A figure stood there just beyond visibility, a blur of human shape. I called out, voice steady despite the adrenaline, "Who's there?" No answer, just silence. Then, from multiple directions, the whisper came again, perfectly synchronized, "Alara." I lunged forward instinctively, knife out, slicing through the mist. My hands met only air. The shadow flickered, vanishing, and yet I felt it, behind, above, everywhere. It didn't need to strike. Its presence alone was enough to terrify, to unnerve, to control the mind. I stumbled back toward a fallen log, trying to create a barrier, a line of safety. My breathing was shallow, but my mind raced for solutions. I could not run blindly. I would become another unexplained death. My eyes swept the foggy clearing, noting every tree, every root, every possible path. Survival demanded observation. That's when I noticed the first anomaly, small, subtle movements in the mist, tiny ripples where nothing should have moved. Shadows shifted independently like the fog itself was alive. And then the whisper again, this time clearer, more urgent. "Alara, follow me." A part of me recoiled, but curiosity, professional instinct, and survival instinct combined. If I ignored it, it would continue to stalk me. If I followed, I might discover its nature, its weakness. I chose to move, cautiously, each step deliberate. The mist thickened and the forest seemed to close in, trees bending, shadows stretching unnaturally. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, shaping the environment, manipulating perception. Every sound, every shift of light, every shadow was its tool. And then I understood. I was not simply in the forest. The forest had become a weapon, and I was the target. I pressed on, heart hammering, knife ready, senses straining. The whisper followed me, never more than a heartbeat away, sometimes behind, sometimes ahead, always everywhere. The psychological pressure was immense. My thoughts began to fragment. Was I imagining things? Were these the early signs of madness? Or was it truly intelligent, learning, toying, manipulating reality itself? The entity had revealed its superiority. I had to improvise. Observation alone would not suffice. I needed strategy. And I realized the first rule of survival here. I must control the pace, the environment, the choices, make the first move. Even as fear gnawed at the edges of reason, my mind was calculating. I had to survive. But I knew deep down that whatever was here, it was patient. And I was already part of its game. I moved cautiously through the fog, each footstep deliberate, listening to the subtle shifts in the forest. The mist seemed to pulse, rising and falling like a slow, deliberate breath. I could feel its gaze pressing against my skin, settling into the small hairs on my arms, creeping into my thoughts. Every shadow became a question, every sound a warning. I forced myself to remember the basics. Observation first. reaction second. Panic is a luxury I cannot afford. My knife remained tight in my grip, my senses sharp, yet I knew weapons alone would do little. This was a predator unlike any I had faced. Its strength was perception, its speed the manipulation of reality itself. I reached a narrow ridge overlooking a small ravine. The fog below was almost tangible, swirling, twisting, hiding everything. I paused, scanning the tree line above and below. That's when I saw it, if you could call it saw. A figure, pale, almost featureless, standing upright among the trees. It wasn't quite human, yet it mimicked the posture perfectly. Its head tilted as though studying me, curiosity radiating from its very presence. I whispered under my breath, analyzing. Its intelligence was evident. It had studied me, how it moved, how I breathed, how I reacted. The realization struck me cold. It doesn't just hunt physically. It studies prey as a scientist studies a specimen, testing limits, provoking reactions. I decided to test it. I lifted my knife slightly and lunged sideways, a controlled feint toward the figure. In response, it moved, but not the way a human would. The motion was too precise, too fluid, yet impossibly fast. It shifted into the fog and vanished, only to reappear several meters away, facing me exactly as if anticipating my move before I had made it. I backed up, mind racing. I had to improvise. If it could predict my actions, I had to be unpredictable. I began to make erratic movements, zigzagging, changing pace, dropping objects to distract it. I grabbed a small branch and flung it into the fog. The shadow reacted immediately, moving toward it, almost with curiosity, but then paused, as if unsure. It wasn't just intelligent. It was calculating, measuring my reactions. The whispers started again, soft, seductive, almost intimate. Alara, don't be afraid. Come closer. My stomach churned. The voice was not just imitation, it was manipulation. It could get inside my mind, sow doubt, lure me into mistakes. I forced myself to focus, repeating mental drills. Observation, pattern recognition, distraction, control. I remembered the creek I had passed earlier. Water could serve as a barrier. Most predators don't like crossing moving water, especially ones reliant on perception and mimicry. I altered my path, heading downhill toward the creek, keeping my movements unpredictable, eyes scanning every shadow. My pulse pounded. Every instinct screamed danger. As I approached the creek, I noticed something unnatural in the fog. Faint, duplicated prints on the other side of the water, perfectly mirroring mine. It had crossed the water, or it had been waiting there. My heart sank. Its intelligence, patience, and adaptability were terrifying. I was dealing with a predator that could not only follow but anticipate, adapt, and manipulate the environment itself. I stepped carefully into the shallow water, feeling the cold seep through my boots. The ripple of water distorted reflections, giving me brief moments of concealment. For a few seconds, I thought I had gained an advantage. The figure no longer visible, only the soft whispers fading. Relief was brief. A shadow coalesced in the mist, barely perceptible, behind a tree on the far bank, mirroring my movements exactly. It was toying with me. I gritted my teeth and considered my options. Running was no longer feasible. It would anticipate. Fighting it head-on was suicidal. I had to use the environment, misdirection, and timing. My eyes scanned the surroundings, broken branches, loose stones, a fallen log spanning part of the creek. Improvisation was my only weapon. I picked up a loose stone and flung it deep into the fog, far from my position. The figure reacted instantly, moving toward the sound with unnerving precision. I lunged behind a tree, hiding my presence, careful not to make any noise. My hands shook, not with fear exactly, but with the intensity of concentration of survival. Every nerve was taut, every muscle ready. The whispers resumed, this time from multiple directions, overlapping, layered. Alara, come here. You can't hide. My mind threatened to fracture under the psychological assault, but I forced myself to focus. One rule above all: observation, anticipation, patience. The forest was no longer just trees and mist. It was a chessboard, and I had to move several steps ahead. I waited. Seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A blur, not quite human, sliding along the mist, circling, watching, testing. I breathed slowly, steadying myself. When it lunged, I reacted instinctively, sidestepping and slashing with the knife. Again, air. Nothing. But the movement disrupted its rhythm briefly. It paused, tilted its head, and studied me. Intelligence, patience, and malice radiated from it in equal measure. I realized something vital. It reacts to fear, to hesitation, to predictability. I had to deny it the satisfaction of control. I began to whisper my own voice notes, narrating my actions aloud as if to myself, as if to confuse it. Step left. Branch thrown. Pause. Move forward. The forest seemed to respond, shadows twisting unpredictably with each command I gave aloud. It hesitated. For the first time, I saw an opportunity. I sprinted along a path I had scouted earlier, zigzagging, throwing branches, disturbing leaves. The creature mirrored partially, but not perfectly, giving me a slight lead. My lungs burned, but adrenaline sharpened every sense. I reached a section of the forest where the trees thinned, a small ridge leading to a secondary creek. I paused, heart hammering, scanning behind me. The figure was still there, lingering at the edge of the mist, analyzing, learning. I could not defeat it, not in combat, but I could escape for now. Survival meant distance, unpredictability, and leveraging every environmental advantage. I plunged into the second creek, water splashing cold around my knees. It hesitated, then followed, but the uneven banks slowed it. I sprinted up the far side, breaking through thick undergrowth, and finally, after what felt like hours, reached a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley below. I collapsed, gasping, knife clutched, every muscle screaming in exhaustion. I was alive, for now. But I knew the truth. Whatever this entity was, it had not been defeated. It had been tested, and I had been observed, studied, and pushed to my limits. The forest itself had become its weapon, and I was its prey. I could escape this night, perhaps survive the next, but the thought that haunted me most was simple. I had glimpsed intelligence, patience, and cunning beyond human comprehension. And somewhere deep in the Zelenka forest, it waited, patient, observant, hungry for the next challenge. I would return home, report the findings, and live another day. But the whisper would stay with me, echoing in my mind, Alara! And I knew, with cold certainty, that the forest was not done with me. I spent the remainder of the day perched on the rocky outcrop, watching the fog crawl through the Zelenka forest like slow, malevolent water. My muscles ached, my lungs burned, but I forced myself to stay alert. The whispers had faded with the retreating light, yet the sensation of being observed remained deep in my bones. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves made my pulse spike. Night arrived quickly in the valley. The fog thickened until it was nearly impossible to see more than a few meters ahead. Shadows coalesced unnaturally, twisting and crawling along the contours of the land. I forced myself to set up a temporary camp, using a fallen log as a seat and spreading my jacket over it for insulation. I couldn't risk fire. Flames and smoke would give away my location instantly. Instead, I relied on the dim beam of my flashlight, careful to sweep it slowly, never staying on one spot too long. Sleep was impossible. My mind refused it, replaying every movement of the day, every fleeting figure, every whisper. I tried to focus on rational thoughts, traces, footprints, environmental cues, but the forest seemed to resist comprehension. Every shadow shifted, every sound warped. I began to notice patterns that weren't there, or were they? The entity was clever, shaping perception to confuse me, to force doubt. Hours passed. Midnight arrived, though time felt distorted. That's when I heard it again, whispering, soft, deliberate, unmistakable. Alara. I froze. This time the voice was close, almost intimate. Somewhere behind me, yet the mist obscured everything. My instincts screamed to flee, but flight without strategy would be fatal. I gripped my knife tighter, eyes scanning the thick fog. The whisper came again, almost teasing, coaxing. Come to me. I forced myself to think. It craves fear, hesitation, doubt. It thrives on uncertainty. I would not give it the satisfaction. Instead, I began speaking aloud, narrating my movements as I had before. Step back, hold position, shift left, observe. The rhythm of my voice became my anchor, my lifeline. Then I saw it, or thought I did. A figure emerged, pale and blurred, moving toward me from the shadowed tree line. My mind screamed, "It's close, too close." I lunged to the side, knife ready. The figure twisted unnaturally, sliding through the fog with impossible fluidity. It was fast, faster than anything human. Every instinct screamed danger, yet my training forced me to assess its movement, its direction, its behavior. I noticed something subtle, its reflections in the water of a small nearby pool. The figure appeared slightly delayed, almost as if the reflection couldn't keep pace with the actual movement. A trick of the mind or a weakness? I seized the opportunity. I darted toward the pool, kicking rocks into it, creating splashes and reflections to confuse it. The shadow hesitated, momentarily disrupted by the ripples. I sprinted, zigzagging, using every trick I had learned. Branches whipped against my face, roots threatened to trip me, but I ignored the pain. Every second counted. Every distraction mattered. And then I made a mistake. A root caught my foot. I fell forward, knife clattering against a rock. The shadow was on me in an instant, impossibly fast. I felt a presence over me, cold, overwhelming, almost sentient. Panic surged, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. I grabbed the knife, swinging blindly. It passed through the mist, striking nothing. The entity recoiled slightly, not from pain, but as if curious, almost amused. I scrambled backwards, sliding down the slope, and hit the ground with a thud. The whispers returned, louder now, multiple voices overlapping. "Why do you run, Alara? Why do you hide?" My mind threatened to fracture. My professional composure, honed over years of examining the dead, trembled under the psychological assault. I realized then that fighting it directly was futile. Its strength was in manipulation, perception, fear. If I was to survive, I had to outthink it, not outfight it. My eyes darted around, searching for an advantage. That's when I remembered the creek, water, movement, reflection. It could anticipate me in the forest, but perhaps not when I manipulated the environment. I crawled toward the creek, careful to minimize noise. My breaths came shallow and fast. The whispers followed, teasing, coaxing, taunting, but I ignored them. I focused on the reflective surface, the pool, the angles, the distortions I could create. I had to mislead it. Reaching the water's edge, I took a deep breath and hurled a large rock into the pool, creating a splash and a cloud of mist. I then dove low, rolling through the shallow water, staying just out of sight. The entity reacted immediately, rushing toward the sound, but I had already slipped into a narrow channel, water covering my trail. I ran as silently as possible, using the natural barriers of the forest to confuse it. Roots, fallen logs, and undergrowth became shields. I could hear it behind me, a faint, fluid rustling, but my manipulations had slowed its pursuit. I had gained time, not safety, but time. Eventually, I reached a narrow ridge, high above the valley floor. From this vantage point, I could see faint light far below. A distant road, perhaps a cabin with a lantern. Hope surged briefly. I forced my legs to move, descending carefully, using every ounce of caution and intelligence I had left. The whispers persisted, but now they were fragmented, distant. It was learning, adapting, yet still momentarily deceived. I kept moving, staying aware, staying unpredictable. My exhaustion was extreme, but survival demanded it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I broke through the last line of trees and stumbled onto the faintly illuminated path. Relief hit me like a wave, though the knowledge that I had not defeated it lingered in every nerve. I paused, gasping, hands on my knees, listening. Only the wind whispered through the valley now. The mist seemed less oppressive, though I knew it still lingered in the forest's depths. I had survived, for now, but I knew the truth. The entity had not been vanquished. It had been tested, and it had learned. The forest itself remained a labyrinth, a weapon, and it was patient. Somewhere in the fog, in the twisting shadows, it waited. Patient, observant, intelligent, and perhaps hungering for the next encounter. I staggered to the distant light, my mind racing, adrenaline slowly ebbing. I would report what I had experienced, perhaps sound credible only to myself. But deep down, I understood that I had glimpsed a predator beyond comprehension. I had survived, but the forest, the entity, the whispers, none of it was gone. I glanced back once at the dark outline of the trees and shivered. A part of me wanted to run again, to flee forever. But another part, the part trained to study the dead and the unknown, knew one thing with certainty. I had seen it. I had survived it, and one day I might return, not to conquer, but to understand. And when that day comes, I would not be unprepared. For now, though, the forest kept its secrets, and I kept my life. And somewhere, deep in the mist, it waited. I eventually reached the road. A faint glow from a distant lantern marked the edge of a small village, or at least what passed for one at this hour. My legs shook with exhaustion, my mind still racing from the events in the Zelenka forest. The mist clung to my coat and hair, and every nerve in my body remained alert, as if the forest itself had followed me, whispering warnings. When a local patrol appeared, lanterns swinging and horses snorting, I nearly collapsed into their arms. I tried to speak, but my words came out fragmented, breathless, incoherent. The officer's sharp eyes took me in, noting my trembling hands and the wild panic in my gaze. I forced myself to breathe, to explain, choosing my words carefully. I was investigating the deaths in the forest. Something is there. Something intelligent. It can mimic, manipulate perception, even voices. The officer frowned, though the flicker of unease in his eyes betrayed that he'd heard similar claims before. He offered to escort me back to the village, and I accepted, walking slowly, every sense straining toward the forest I had just escaped. Even with the distance growing between me and the tree line, I felt it. Not its presence exactly, but the echo of it, the lingering weight of awareness. I knew it had not moved far. The entity, whatever it was, remained patient, watching, waiting. My rational mind fought against the instinctive dread, but my body remembered every whisper, every twitch of shadow, every impossibly precise movement. The forest had left its mark on me. Back in the village, I tried to document everything while my hands still shook. Footprints, tree patterns, reflections in water, whispered voices, every detail I could remember. I sketched the shapes I had glimpsed in the fog, noting subtle irregularities in the forest floor, the way shadows seemed to bend unnaturally. My notes felt inadequate, though. No words could capture the intelligence, the patience, the sheer otherworldly calculation of the entity. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the village buildings, every whisper of wind through narrow streets made my pulse spike. I kept imagining shadows at the edge of the fog, figures coalescing and dissolving in impossible shapes. Even the faintest noises sounded like footsteps following me. I tried to rationalize it. Exhaustion, adrenaline, fear. They all played tricks on the mind. But deep down, I knew better. The Zelenka forest had something I could neither define nor escape. Something that had studied me, learned me, and perhaps marked me. Days passed. I returned to my apartment, attempted to resume normal life, but the shadows lingered, not in the light, but in my thoughts. I found myself double-checking doors, scanning hallways, listening for voices that didn't exist. I began noticing subtle anomalies, reflections in mirrors that didn't quite match, fleeting movements in the corner of my eye. Could it follow me beyond the forest? Or was my mind unraveling under the weight of what I had seen? One evening, I received a call from the local authorities in the Zelenka region. Another death had occurred. The report was brief. A body found near the forest edge, no signs of struggle, no explanation. The description chilled me to the bone. It fit the pattern perfectly. Footprints ending abruptly, subtle displacement of vegetation, the body arranged in a pose suggesting confusion or terror. I recognized the signature immediately. It'd been there again, patient, observing, hunting. The thought made my stomach knot. It wasn't random. It wasn't an accident. The entity had learned. It was methodical, intelligent, and it seemed to operate on a schedule beyond human comprehension. I tried to shake it off, but the whispers returned. Not in the forest this time, but in my mind. Soft, impossible, intimate. Alara. I had survived the encounter, yes, but survival was not victory. It had tested me, adapted to me, and I had only escaped by exploiting a momentary weakness. Its intelligence ensured that next time it would anticipate my every move. I returned to the Zelenka region months later, this time with more preparation, more tools, more allies. Yet even then, I felt the forest's gaze, the lingering presence of the entity that had toyed with me. Our attempts to trap it or observe it directly proved futile. Footprints would vanish, shadows would twist, and whispers would echo from impossible angles. No one else could see it clearly. It manipulated perception so thoroughly that witnesses often dismissed it as imagination, fatigue, or paranoia. I alone knew the truth. The forest is alive, but not with life as we understand it. The entity remains patient, intelligent, and terrifyingly persistent. And sometimes at night, I still hear the whispers. Alara, the thought follows me wherever I go. Every shadow, every mist, every ripple of water reminds me that the forest is not done with me. It has not been defeated. It waits quietly for the next intrusion, the next mistake, the next victim. And I know deep in my bones that it remembers me as I will always remember it. The Zelenka forest holds its secrets tightly. Shadows twist, whispers linger, and somewhere just beyond sight, the entity watches, intelligent, patient, unrelenting. I survived, yes, but the horror has not ended, and I suspect it never will. My name is Sergeant Darius Kovac, NATO Special Operations, born in Croatia, trained to survive in deserts, jungles, frozen tundras. I've fought in places where the cold cut deeper than bullets and where silence was more dangerous than gunfire. I don't scare easy. At least that's what I've always told myself. This time, though, I wasn't on a battlefield. Not officially. Our unit had been sent north into the Mongolian mountains, the frozen isolation of Kovsgol, on what they called a routine reconnaissance. There were rumors of unusual satellite readings, heat blooms in valleys that should have been lifeless, entire grids of snow vanishing overnight as if something beneath had breathed out. Our mission was simple: confirm or deny. Boots in the snow, eyes on the ground. We dropped in by helicopter, 5 of us. Only one of us would leave. The wind hit me first when we landed. It carried the weight of centuries, a smell of iron and ash beneath the bite of clean ice. Snow glittered in sheets across ridgelines, blinding under the pale sun. But what unsettled me was the quiet. Too quiet. Even in places like this, you hear something. The distant crack of ice, the sigh of trees, the groan of mountains shifting. Here, nothing. No sound but our boots crunching frost and our breath misting in short, nervous bursts. I should have noticed the first warning sign right there when Corporal Vasiliev muttered, "Snow's wrong." He crouched, touched it, rubbed it between his fingers. It wasn't pure white. Underneath, faint veins of black threaded through the crystals like soot frozen into glass. I brushed it off then, industrial pollution drifting on wind currents. But I felt the unease settle in me, deep and sour. We moved toward the valley. The terrain fell away in slow descents, the ice crusting over rocks that looked like teeth gnashing up from the ground. Clouds dragged shadows like bruises across the land. My eyes kept catching movement where there was none, dark flickers in the edges of my vision, shapes gliding beneath the snow as if something alive was swimming underfoot. I told myself it was light distortion, fatigue, imagination. Soldiers lie to themselves to stay steady, but each step forward made that lie harder to believe. Hours later, we set camp against a jagged cliff wall. The temperature had already dropped well below -20. I layered my gear, rubbed warmth into my fingers, checked weapons, rituals that grounded me. Vasiliev still wouldn't shut up about the snow. He held a handful near the firelight, and when it melted, the water in his palm wasn't clear. It was faintly gray, oily, like melted tar diluted. No one laughed. No one had the energy to. That night, I took first watch. Stars burned sharp enough to pierce the sky, so many I felt small beneath them. The others slept, breath shallow, frost forming in their beards. My eyes roamed the horizon, alert for anything. That's when I heard it. A sound carried on the wind, not animal, not human. A hollow resonance, low and drawn out, like metal dragged across stone. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far enough for comfort. I froze, scanning the snowfields. Nothing moved. Nothing broke the monotony of white and shadow. But the sound came again, slightly nearer this time, vibrating through my boots into my bones. I wanted to wake the others, but I didn't. Command drilled into us that not every strange thing deserved panic. Instead, I tightened my grip on my rifle, steadying my breath. The sound stopped as abruptly as it had begun. Then the snow shifted. A patch 20 meters away bulged upward as though something massive pressed against it from beneath. The crust cracked in a jagged circle, steam hissing out in a white plume. My mouth went dry. The bulge sank back down just as quickly, sealing itself over, as if nothing had ever happened. I didn't move for what felt like hours. Finally, I convinced myself it was geothermal activity, an underground vent, a trick of nature. I didn't believe that for a second, but it was the only way I could stay calm until dawn. When the sun rose, I didn't tell the others what I'd seen. Not yet. But as we packed, I saw Vasiliev staring at me, pale, lips pressed tight. He hadn't been asleep after all. He'd heard it too. We pushed deeper into the valley that morning, our boots sinking into drifts that felt heavier than they should have. I kept glancing back at the campfire ashes we left behind, a small gray scar on the white, already vanishing beneath a slow dusting of fresh snow. That was how quickly this place erased signs of life. One night, one storm, and it would be as if we'd never existed. The air thinned as we descended, the sky tightening overhead, clouds bruising the horizon. I felt it in my chest first, an unnatural pressure, like someone slowly pressing down on me with both palms. Lieutenant Sorensen, our team lead, kept pushing forward, compass in hand, his jaw locked with that stubborn Nordic stoicism I both respected and resented. He didn't ask for opinions, only barked orders to keep moving. But I could see it in the others. Morales rubbing his temples, Vasiliev licking cracked lips, every one of us breathing shorter, shallower. It wasn't just altitude. It was something else. The cold no longer bit clean. It clung, sticky, like damp smoke. Around midday, we reached the grid coordinates Command had given us, a depression in the valley floor where the snow looked wrong. It wasn't smooth. It rippled in concentric patterns, waves frozen mid-motion, like something had stirred beneath the surface before the freeze. Sorensen muttered, "Thermal anomaly," and ordered us to fan out. I didn't want to step onto it, but orders were orders. My boots sank deeper than expected, the crunch muted. My stomach twisted as I realized the ground wasn't solid beneath me. It shifted, just slightly, like a membrane stretched over something hollow. I took my weight off immediately, moving back. Morales wasn't so cautious. He stomped forward, swore under his breath, and slammed his ice pick down. The snow split with a noise that made my teeth ache, a tearing, wet sound, not the crisp crack of ice. A thin geyser hissed upward, spattering his goggles with gray slush that reeked of sulfur and blood. He staggered back, gagging. The ground trembled once, then stilled. "Enough," Sorensen barked. "Mark it, move out. HQ will want samples." His voice was steady, but I caught the tightness in it. He'd seen it too. That wasn't ice. We set camp further upslope that night, but the valley floor kept its grip on me. I couldn't shake the memory of that slush clinging to Morales' gear, dripping thick as spit. The smell had stuck in my nostrils, even after we burned his gloves. I should have slept, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard that sound again. The drawn-out resonance from the night before, metallic and hollow. Only this time, it threaded into my dreams. I saw shapes moving beneath the ice, long limbs folding in ways that didn't make sense, pressed against the translucent sheet like insects beneath glass. I woke sweating in sub-zero cold. On my second watch, I noticed something worse. Our tracks, the prints we'd left climbing upslope, were gone, not filled in by drifting snow. Gone, as if the ground itself had erased them. The untouched surface stretched behind us, blank and glistening, like no human foot had ever marred it. I turned slowly, scanning the camp. My teammates slept in their bags, mouths open, breath rising faint and ghostly. Then I saw Vasiliev's eyes. They were open. He wasn't sleeping. He was staring at me, pupils huge, unblinking. "What is it?" I whispered, moving closer. He shook his head slowly, then lifted one gloved hand. He pointed toward the valley floor. At first I saw nothing. Then I did. The The snow moved. Not like drifting powder, not like shifting wind. It pulsed, subtle, steady, as though the valley itself had a heartbeat. Each rise and fall pushed a faint vibration up through the rocks beneath my boots. I felt it in my knees, in my chest cavity, sinking uncomfortably with my own pulse. Vasiliev's whisper cracked in the dark. It's breathing. Neither of us slept after that. By morning, Sorensen was already packing gear, barking at us to keep moving. He claimed our orders were to push further east, but I knew the truth. He'd felt it too. He wanted out of that valley, though he'd never admit it. Soldiers didn't run from shadows, not on paper. We climbed along the ridgeline, the wind slicing harder, spitting crystals like razors. But the farther we went, the heavier the silence became. It wasn't absence of sound anymore. It was the presence of something waiting, listening. At midday, we found the bodies. They were half buried, 2 of them, frozen stiff in a shallow depression where the snow had thinned. Not locals, wrong clothing. Military issue, Western, though not our unit. Their insignias had been scratched off. One man's jaw hung loose, eyes wide open, frost webbed across his lashes. The other had no face left at all, just a smooth black smear where features should have been, as though the ice itself had melted and fused over him. Morales cursed, staggered back, crossed himself. Sorensen ordered silence and ordered us to search the remains. No weapons, no comms, no explanation, only their boots left untarnished. We cacked soles worn in patterns that told me they'd been running. Hard. That night I heard the sound again, louder. Not distant anymore, not below. This time it was right outside camp. Something dragged itself slowly across the snow, circling us, its weight pressing down on the earth until I could feel it humming in my molars. I held my rifle tight, finger grazing the trigger, sweat slicking my palms despite the cold. The sound stopped. I dared a glance beyond the firelight and saw an impression in the snow, a long, sinuous groove, stretching in a perfect circle around us, as if something had marked us. By the 3rd day, discipline was starting to crack. Soldiers don't like to admit fear, but fear isn't always loud. It leaks in quiet ways. Morales checked his rifle too often, hands trembling when he thought no one noticed. Vasiliev muttered under his breath, words I didn't recognize, maybe prayers in Russian. Even Sorensen, the rock, snapped at us with an edge that betrayed unease. We were moving east along the ridge when we saw them. More bodies. 6 this time, scattered at odd intervals like toys dropped by a careless hand. Some lay curled, others sprawled with arms reaching upward. No wounds. No blood. Their eyes were open, mouths frozen mid-scream, but their skin had a translucent cast, as though the flesh had been leached of color. I crouched over one, brushed frost from his face. The pupils were dilated so wide they swallowed all color, black discs staring into nothing. His lips were coated in a thin gray film, almost waxy. They look suffocated, Morales muttered. Shut it, Sorensen barked. But I could see his hands clenched tighter on his rifle. He wasn't wrong. These men hadn't died in a fight. They'd been taken, slowly, silently, drained. We didn't linger. The weather worsened as we pressed on. Wind howled through the cliffs, carrying a strange undertone, a low vibration that seemed to thread itself through our bones. It wasn't sound, not exactly. More like resonance, like being inside a massive bell just after it's been struck. Every time it swelled, I felt my stomach clench. Night came early under heavy clouds, and we set camp in a crevice, half sheltered from the wind. We built no fire. Sorensen ordered light discipline, though I think he feared attracting attention more than wasting fuel. We huddled in the dark, the cold gnawing. That was when the dreams began. I saw myself beneath the ice, floating in gray-black water, staring upward through a translucent sheet. Above me, 5 figures stood, our unit moving across the snow. I reached up, pounding against the barrier, screaming for them to see me. But instead of looking down, each of them bent slowly, their faces pressing against the ice. Their mouths opened wide, wider than human jaws should, and black water spilled out, flooding toward me. I woke with a gasp, my breath fogging violently in the dark. Vasiliev was awake too, eyes wide, muttering, Oni Prishli, over and over. They came. They came. The ridge vibrated beneath us. At first I thought it was wind-driven snow shifting, but then the sound followed, a dragging, grinding noise, closer than ever. We held still, weapons drawn. No one spoke, and then between two gusts of wind I heard it clearly for the first time. A voice. Not words I understood, a long, low series of syllables that crawled against the inside of my skull. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even loud. It whispered. Yet somehow I felt it deeper than any shout. It felt like it was inside me, pulling thoughts apart like threads. Morales snapped first. He screamed something incoherent, stumbled out of the crevice, and fired into the dark. Muzzle flashes lit snowflakes into glittering fire. The sound of his rifle echoed, sharp and human, cutting through that otherworldly hum. For a moment I believed maybe he'd hit something. Then the snow erupted. Not in a plume, not like an avalanche. It peeled back, smooth and deliberate, as though the ground itself had opened its eyes. A shape rose from beneath, tall, elongated, cloaked in fragments of ice and snow clinging to its surface. It didn't have a face, but where a face should be, the snow swirled in a constant spiral, black flecks glimmering within it. Morales fired again and again, screaming. The rounds vanished into that shifting mass as though the thing absorbed them. Then a limb stretched outward, longer than any human arm, ending in something both claw and shadow, and wrapped around him. He didn't even have time to scream properly. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, pulled into the spiral of snow. Silence fell. All that remained was Morales' rifle, lying in the snow where he dropped it. We didn't move. We didn't breathe. My training screamed at me to act, to fire, to fight, but every instinct in my body knew it was useless. You can't fight a storm. You can't fight the earth. And this thing, it was both. Slowly, the shape sank back beneath the snow. The spiral closed, the ground smoothed over as if untouched. We were four now. Sorensen broke the silence. We finished the mission. We get to extraction. That's it. His voice shook, just slightly, but it was enough. Vasiliev spat in the snow. No mission worth this. Shut up. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My mind replayed what I'd seen, the spiral, the limb, the way it had pulled Morales without a struggle. And the worst part, the voice still echoed faintly in my skull, as though it had marked me. That night, I dreamt again. This time, Morales was with me under the ice. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear, and his eyes, they were still open, still black, staring at me through the frozen barrier. I woke to Sorensen shaking me. Dawn. Gray light filtered through clouds. My mouth was dry, my muscles weak. Vasiliev and Sorensen were arguing already, sharp whispers that carried in the still air. Then we realized something. Our footprints from last night? Gone. But new prints had appeared, circling the camp. And there were 5 sets. Not 4. 5. We stared at those footprints for a long time, too long, each of us trying to convince ourselves they weren't what they clearly were. 5 sets. Perfect. Heavy impressions. But Morales was gone. Sorensen's jaw flexed, frost stiff in his beard. Animals, he muttered. Tracks drift, confuse the eye. No one believed him. The prints were boot-shaped. Ours. Morales' tread. The pattern on his soles I'd memorized in training. He was still with us, in some way. We broke camp fast, silence pressing on us heavier than our packs. The wind had died. No cover, no sound but the crunch of our boots. Every step felt like moving deeper into a grave. As we climbed toward the eastern ridge, I kept glancing back. The tracks followed. Not beside us. Not behind us. With us. Each time I counted, there were 4 men ahead of me, but 5 sets of impressions. My thoughts began to fracture. Training drilled into me that fear was a tool, a blade you sharpen, never let dull. But here, fear was a sickness. It spread quiet, soft, curling inside my ribs until my breath came uneven. I forced my focus outward, rifle, horizon, Sorensen's commands. One step, then the next. By midday, we reached a gorge that split the valley floor, a jagged wound in the earth. Ice crusted the edges, but steam pulsed faintly from below. The air smelled like sulfur and rot. The only way forward was across a narrow snow bridge that spanned the gorge. Sorensen tested it with his weight, then waved us forward. One by one, we crossed. The snow compressed, groaned, but held. Vasiliev went first, then me. My heart hammered as I glanced down. The depths below weren't black like I expected. They glowed faintly like an ember smothered under ash. Something moved there, slow, deliberate. I forced my eyes away, kept walking. Halfway across, I felt it again, the resonance, the hum that wasn't sound but pressure. The bridge trembled beneath us. "Move," Sorensen barked. We scrambled, boots slipping on packed snow. I threw myself forward, landing hard on my knees at the far side. Vasiliev cursed, pulling himself up beside me. Then Sorensen was across. But Corporal Jensen wasn't. The youngest of us, quiet, steady. He was 3 steps from safety when the bridge buckled. Not collapsed. Buckled, as though something pushed up from beneath. Snow burst outward in a geyser of gray and black, and a limb shot through, long, jointless, coated in shifting ice. It wrapped Jensen's legs in one fluid motion. He screamed, clawed at the bridge, left gouges in the snow. We lunged forward, hands out, but it dragged him fast, too fast. His body slid backward, arms flailing, rifle spinning away. His scream cut off in a wet snap as he was yanked down into the gorge. Silence. Then the bridge smoothed over. The snow sealed. Gone. 3 of us left. Vasiliev collapsed against the ridge wall, muttering prayers, breath steaming in ragged bursts. Sorensen gripped his rifle so tight his knuckles bled white. I swallowed bile, forcing it down, focusing on what was left of the mission, on survival. But deep down, I knew there was no mission anymore, only endurance. We marched on in grim silence, every step echoing hollow in the gorge walls. The air grew thicker, heavy with the stink of wet ash. And the footprints, still 5. Always 5. That night, we didn't even try to sleep. We sat in a triangle, rifles ready, backs to stone. The cold gnawed into bone, but none of us moved. None dared. At some point, hours deep in the dark, I heard it again. The voice, clearer now, threading the silence with words I almost understood. My name. It whispered my name. I froze, heart hammering. Darius. The voice came from behind me, but Sorensen and Vasiliev were in front. I turned, slow, rifle raised, and there he was. Morales, or something wearing him. He stood at the edge of the firelight, snow clinging to his gear, his face pale, lips torn. His eyes black, wide, endless. His mouth moved, shaping my name again. Vasiliev hissed, raising his weapon. Sorensen grabbed his arm, hissed, "Hold fire!" Morales, or the thing inside him, stepped closer. His movements weren't right, too slow, too deliberate, like each joint bent against itself. When he smiled, frost cracked along his cheeks. "Darius," he whispered again. Every instinct screamed to shoot. But training locked me down. Identify, confirm, control. My finger hovered on the trigger, breath sharp in my throat. Then Morales tilted his head. His jaw unhinged wider, until it cracked open in a black spiral of snow and ash. The resonance hit full force. My skull throbbed, teeth vibrating in my jaw. Vasiliev screamed and fired, rounds tearing through the night. The figure burst into a cyclone of snow and shadow, rushing outward. The wind howled, lifting powder into a blinding storm. When it cleared, Morales was gone. But the footprints remained. 5. Always 5. We moved at first light, though none of us had really slept. My body felt hollow, running on instinct more than strength. I'd stopped trying to understand what was happening, whether it was some buried creature, a phenomenon, or the earth itself turning against us. Survival was the only compass left. The snow had changed. It wasn't pure white anymore, not even at the untouched edges of the ridge. It shimmered faintly gray like ash mixed into flour. Each step sank deeper than it should have, as though the crust beneath had softened overnight. Sorensen set the pace, shoulders hunched, rifle tight, jaw clenched. Vasiliev muttered to himself again, the same phrase over and over. Oni Prishli, Oni Prishli. They came. They came. Hours passed. No landmarks changed. The ridgeline bent in impossible ways, repeating itself. I swore I saw the same cracked boulder 3 times, the same bent fir tree looming against the horizon. We weren't moving forward. We were circling, caught in some loop. When I mentioned it, Sorensen snarled, "Shut your mouth and keep walking." His voice cracked as he said it, the iron edge breaking into desperation. That was when I knew he knew too. By late afternoon, the sky dimmed unnaturally fast. Clouds rolled low, swollen and bruised, turning the snow into a gray wasteland. The wind picked up, carrying that resonance again. Not sound, not wind, but vibration. My teeth clattered, not from cold, but from the hum running through the air. We found the extraction beacon at dusk. It was just a metal pole stabbed into the snow, the small transmitter light blinking faintly red. Sorensen exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. He dropped to his knees beside it, fumbling with the receiver, barking into the mic. "This is Unit Echo 7. Coordinates confirmed. Immediate extraction. Do you read?" Static hissed back. No voice, just a low, drawn-out tone, warbling through the speaker like a signal drowned in deep water. He tried again, louder. "Repeat, this is Echo 7, requesting evac. Urgent priority." The tone grew louder, vibrating through the metal, through the snow, through us. I backed away, rifle raised, scanning the horizon. My gut told me the beacon wasn't calling help. It was calling it. Then the snow moved. 50 meters out, the surface bulged upward in a massive circle. Steam hissed, cracks spiderwebbed across the crust. The ground pulsed slow and steady. Breathing. "Positions!" Sorensen roared, yanking his rifle up. We formed a triangle, me, Vasiliev, Sorensen, barrels leveled. My heart slammed so hard it hurt. The bulge split open with a sound like tearing flesh, and from it something began to rise. It wasn't a creature in any form I knew. It was tall, but its edges blurred, shifting between snow, shadow, and limbs that stretched too long. Where a head should have been, the spiral churned, black snowflakes spinning inward like a vortex. The resonance blared now, shaking my vision, warping the world around it. It stepped forward. The snow didn't crunch. It bent, flowed, molded beneath its weight. We opened fire. The valley lit with muzzle flashes, thunder of gunfire echoing in jagged cliffs. Bullets tore through the shape, spraying fragments of snow and shadow. For a second, I thought it staggered. Then the pieces swirled back together, whole again. Stronger. Vasiliev screamed, dropped his rifle, and ran. Straight into the storm. "Vasiliev!" I shouted, but it was too late. The ground beneath him gave way, and a second shape surged upward, limbs wrapping him. His scream cut off instantly. Pulled under. Gone. Two of us left. Sorensen kept firing, fury replacing fear. "Come on, you bastard!" he bellowed. His defiance lit something in me too, a soldier's instinct to fight, even when the war was already lost. But then the spiral turned toward me. I felt it, not in my ears, not even in my head, but in my bones. My name, whispered, drawn out, stretching. "Darius!" My rifle slipped in my hands, vision swimming. The hum cracked through me, rattling organs, twisting thought. I dropped to my knees, clutching my skull, blood dripping from my nose. Through the haze, I saw Sorensen charge. He emptied his magazine, screaming, then pulled a knife and lunged. The spiral turned, the resonance deepened this, and the snow rose around him like a tidal wave. He vanished inside it, swallowed whole. Silence returned. I was alone. The spiral faced me, shifting, waiting. I forced myself to my feet, swaying. I didn't fire. I didn't run. I just stared back, teeth clenched, throat raw, and then slowly it sank back beneath the snow. The surface smoothed over, blank as untouched ice. The beacon still blinked red. I staggered to it, dropped to my knees. Static still hissed, but faint beneath it. I heard something else. Not words. Breathing. Not mine. The beacon's red light blinked steady, mocking each pulse in rhythm with my hammering heart. I pressed the receiver to my ear, hoping for anything human, anything familiar. All I got was the static, threaded with that low, steady breath. Each exhale scraped like sandpaper. Each inhale rattled like stones dragged across metal. I ripped the headset off, panting, bile burning the back of my throat. My gloves shook as I steadied my rifle, but the valley had gone quiet again. Not peaceful quiet, waiting quiet. The snow under my boots shifted subtly like a living thing flexing. I backed away from the beacon, every nerve screaming that staying near it was death. But where would I go? The ridges stretched in every direction, endless walls of gray-white repeating themselves like a nightmare loop. "Think," I muttered, forcing air into frozen lungs. My training clawed at me. Observe, adapt, survive. I couldn't fight it head-on. That much was clear. But maybe I could outlast it. Maybe. I jammed my last chem light into the snow, a faint green glow pooling around me. I crouched low, scanning 360 degrees, barrel following my gaze. My ears strained, nothing but wind. Then, footsteps. Crunch, crunch, deliberate, slow. My throat tightened. I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 sets, circling just outside the green glow. My vision blurred as I realized I recognized their patterns. Sorensen's heavy stride, Vasiliev's short, sharp pace, Morale's dragging his left boot, Jensen's light step, and mine. All 5. I spun in circles, rifle snapping toward each sound, but no one appeared. Only prints forming in the snow, one after another, the valley writing our story without us. My breath came ragged, fogging, and in it I swore I heard laughter. Not loud, not cruel, just inevitable. "Show yourself," I roared, firing into the night. Muzzle flashes tore open the dark, briefly illuminating nothing but drifting snow. The echoes cracked off the cliffs and died. The footprints stopped. And then the ground opened. Not a crack, not a collapse. It peeled back like skin, revealing black ice beneath, veined with pulsing gray light. The hum roared into a crescendo, rattling my skull so hard I thought my teeth would shatter. Shapes rose from the wound. Not 1, not 2, all 5. Figures coalescing from snow and shadow, wearing the forms of my squad mates. Their faces were wrong, hollow-eyed, their mouths black spirals of ash. They stood in a half circle around me, swaying slightly, whispering my name in unison. "Darius." I stumbled backward, slipped, caught myself. My rifle clattered into the snow. I snatched for my knife, but my hands barely obeyed. The air pressed down, thick, suffocating. They stepped closer. For one mad second, I thought about letting them take me. At least I wouldn't be alone anymore. At least I'd join my brothers, become part of whatever had claimed them. That thought slid into me like a warm blade, terrifying and seductive, all at once. But survival is carved into me deeper than despair. I snapped the flare from my kit, slammed it against my thigh, and it burst to life, vomiting crimson fire into the storm. The figures recoiled, hissing, the spirals in their faces twisting violently. I hurled the flare into the open wound in the snow. The valley lit up blood red, shadows writhing against the cliffs. The hum rose to a scream. The ground convulsed, and for a moment I thought it might swallow the whole ridge. I ran. Boots pounded, lungs tore, vision tunneled. I didn't look back. Couldn't. The resonance followed, growing sharper, angrier, like the mountains themselves were screaming my name now. I scrambled over ridges, slid down slopes, cut my hands open on frozen stone. The flare's glow faded behind me, swallowed by the dark. At some point, the noise stopped. I collapsed against a rock outcrop, gasping, chest on fire. The snow stretched silent again, featureless, endless. I looked back. No tracks followed. No figures stood in the dark, only smooth, untouched white. Had I outrun it, or had it simply let me go? The radio on my chest crackled. I froze. Static hissed, then broke. A voice distant, warbling. Echo 7. Do you copy? Extraction inbound. Relief surged so fast it made me dizzy. I pressed the receiver to my mouth, shouting, "This is Sergeant Kovac, I'm alive, coordinates." But the voice interrupted, clearer now, familiar. "Darius." My blood turned to ice. It wasn't command. It wasn't rescue. It was the whisper. I ripped the radio free, hurled it into the snow, and staggered back. The red light blinked once, twice, then died. Silence fell, and in it, faint but certain, I heard breathing. Not around me, not behind me, inside me. I don't know how long I sat there, knees buried in snow, staring at the dead radio. My breath steamed out ragged, but it no longer felt like mine. Each exhale carried a weight, an echo, like something was breathing with me, or worse, through me. The silence pressed harder than the cold. No wind, no settling ice, just that faint, steady rhythm in my chest, out of sync with my pulse. I pressed my palm against my sternum, desperate to feel only my own heartbeat. Instead, I felt a second throb, slower, deeper, like the valley itself had crept inside me. I wanted to move, to keep running, but my body shook with exhaustion. My training told me to focus, inventory gear, orient myself, find high ground, but those drills were 1,000 miles away. I was alone in a place that didn't follow rules anymore. Snow shifted nearby, not loud, a soft compression, deliberate. I jerked my rifle up, finger trembling on the trigger. Nothing, just white. My eyes darted, searching for shapes, movement, shadows. Then I saw it. A figure, distant, standing motionless on the ridge across the gorge. The same build as Sorensen, broad shoulders, rifle slung. His head turned slowly toward me, though I was too far for details. Still, I knew. The way he stood, the set of his frame, it was him, or what was left of him. I wanted to shout, but the sound stuck in my throat. He didn't move closer. He didn't need to. Because as I blinked, another appeared beside him. Then another, until all four stood there, Morales, Jensen, Vasiliev, Sorensen, lined like sentinels, staring down at me. I aimed my rifle, barrel shaking. They didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the weapon. Their mouths opened in unison, spirals of black snow whirling in the hollow where voices should have been. The resonance hit again, stronger than ever. My ears filled with rushing static, my bones vibrating until I thought they'd splinter. My rifle slipped from my grip, clattering into the snow. I clamped my hands over my ears, but it was useless. The sound wasn't out there. It was inside. Darius! The whisper drowned me. I staggered forward, knees buckling, falling into the snow. The cold bit into my face, but I barely felt it. My vision swam, edges darkening, center filled with the spirals spinning in their mouths. Then silence. I gasped, head snapping up. The ridge was empty. No figures. No footprints. Just white. But when I looked down, I froze. Boot prints surrounded me. Dozens. All leading toward me. All stopping within arm's reach. I was no longer alone. A pressure pressed against my shoulder. I spun, but no one was there. My nerves screamed, body torn between fight and collapse. My hands clenched the knife at my belt, the only weapon left. My training told me to survive, but survive what? You can't kill snow. You can't stab silence. The breath inside me grew heavier, matching the valley's pulse. I realized with a sick drop in my gut, I wasn't running from it anymore. I was becoming it. Panic surged. I jammed the knife into my arm, a desperate act to prove I still existed, that my body was still my own. Pain flared, sharp, grounding. Blood welled, hot against the cold. For a moment, it worked. I was Darius Kovac again, human, alive, but the snow drank it. My blood didn't stain red. It vanished into the powder, sucked downward like water into dry earth. The ground pulsed harder. My vision blurred, spirals swimming across the snowfield. I staggered back, chest heaving, knife slipping from my numb hand. The footprints shifted. No longer random. They aligned, forming a path, a trail leading into the gorge. Every instinct screamed to run the other way, but my legs moved forward. Not dragged, guided. Each step matched the prints, perfectly in sync, as though they'd been waiting for me. At the edge, I stopped. The gorge yawned wide, black ice pulsing faintly beneath. Heat wafted up, smelling of sulfur and decay. The spiral waited below, glowing faint, patient. I should have felt terror. Instead, a sick calm spread through me. The voice in my chest whispered, soft, tender, home. I teetered at the edge, torn between the man I was and the thing calling me down. My hands trembled, my body leaned forward, then a sound cracked the stillness. A helicopter. Distant, faint, but real. Human. Extraction. The calm shattered. My heart roared back, human and frantic. I spun, searching the horizon. A black dot moved against the clouds, growing closer, blades chopping faint through the storm. For the first time in days, I felt hope. But behind me, the gorge pulsed louder, stronger. My name boomed in resonance. Two choices, run for the helicopter or step into the gorge. The snow shifted under my boots, and I still don't know which way I moved. The helicopter's thrum grew louder, real and solid in the storm. My chest clenched with desperate relief. That sound meant warmth, men, escape, a way out. I forced my legs to turn, to move toward it, stumbling through the snow like a drunk. My lungs burned, my wounded arm throbbed, but hope surged bright and sharp. Here! I screamed, voice cracking. I'm here! The black dot grew into a shape, rotors cutting through the frozen air. Searchlights flicked on, spearing the valley with beams of white. For a heartbeat, I felt like a man again, not prey. Then the ground pulsed. The gorge behind me exhaled a wave of heat so strong it melted frost from my beard. My ears filled with resonance, deeper now, shaking the marrow in my bones. My knees buckled, blood dripped from my nose. I turned, too late. The snow peeled open. The spiral rose, massive, filling the sky, not a creature but a wound in reality itself. Black snow whirled upward in a storm, swallowing the helicopter's light. I heard shouting over the comms, panicked voices, but the wind ripped them away. The machine bucked, tilted, fought against the vortex. Darius! My name boomed across the valley, not whispered now, but commanded. The gorge glowed like an open maw, drawing me closer. My legs trembled, muscles straining between survival and surrender. The helicopter dropped lower, straining against the pull, a rope unspooled, swaying wildly in the storm. For a second, I thought I could reach it. Just a sprint, a leap, a grip, and I'd be free. But then I saw them. Figures standing in the snow between me and the rope. Sorensen, Morales, Jensen, Vasiliev. Their faces spiraled voids, mouths yawning black. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking the path. Their arms lifted slowly, palms outward as if to welcome me home. The storm roared, snow whipping sideways, tearing at my eyes. My chest felt split in two, one half screaming to run, the other whispering to let go. The footprints reappeared around me, aligning into a trail straight into the gorge. The helicopter's spotlight flickered once, twice, then died. The machine shuddered and spun, caught in the spiral. I saw it tilt sideways, rotors clipping the ridge. A blossom of fire tore through the storm, then vanished into the snow. The valley went silent again. I was the only one left. The spiral loomed, patient, eternal. My brothers stood in its glow, waiting. My breath matched its rhythm now, steady, inescapable. I dropped to my knees. The snow felt soft, almost warm. My vision blurred. My body leaned forward without command. Home, the voice whispered inside me, tender as a lullaby. I don't remember if I jumped or if the snow reached up to claim me. All I know is the cold ended, and the breathing didn't. There are moments, fragments, that still feel human. I hold on to them like splinters under the skin, the weight of my rifle in my hands, the burn of cold air in my lungs, the sound of Sorensen barking orders with iron in his voice, Morales laughing once before the valley swallowed it forever. But those moments are drifting farther away, scattered like snowflakes in wind. Now, when I breathe, it isn't just me. The air moves too slowly, too deep, as if drawn through caverns larger than my chest. Each exhale rattles with something not mine. The sound doesn't fog the air anymore. It pulses, gray, falling into the snow where it disappears instantly. I don't feel hunger. I don't feel thirst. I only feel the rhythm, the pulse of the valley inside me. At first I fought it, cut myself, bled into the snow, screamed until my throat tore. But the snow swallowed the blood, the wind swallowed the scream, and the valley whispered, patient as a tide, you are not leaving. When I close my eyes, I see the gorge, the spiral eternal, turning inward, faces within it. My brothers, my unit, their mouths wide, whispering endlessly. Sometimes they look at me. Sometimes they look through me. Sometimes I see my own face among them. I don't know if I died when I fell or when I first heard my name whispered in the dark. Maybe death isn't the right word. Maybe this place doesn't allow it. It doesn't kill. It keeps. There are nights, if time still passes, that I imagine footsteps crunching on the snow above me. Another patrol, another mission, another set of boots treading into the silence, and I wonder, will they hear the whispers? Will they see the black snow? Will they feel the valley breathing through them as I do now? I think they will, because the snow never forgets, and I will be waiting. 2 weeks later, a rescue team landed in the Kovsgol Valley. NATO brass had gone quiet on the failed recon op, but satellites kept pinging irregular signals from the same coordinates. Someone had to check. The men disembarked into silence. Their boots sank into untouched snow, crisp and white. No bodies, no wreckage, no signs of life, just the faint wind whispering between ridgelines. Then one of them stopped. He crouched, brushed frost away with his glove. Boot prints, dozens of them, perfectly preserved, circling in patterns that made no sense. Some led into the gorge, where steam still curled upward from cracks in the ice. Others looped back, overlapping, weaving. Strange, the team leader muttered. No storms here for days. Tracks should have filled in. The youngest of them frowned. How many men were on the original patrol? 5. The soldier counted again, his breath caught. There are 6 sets here. The team leader swore under his breath, straightening. He motioned them onward, but his eyes never left the gorge. The steam rising from it pulsed faintly like breath in cold air. No one noticed when the youngest soldier shivered, glancing behind him. He swore he heard someone whisper his name, soft, patient, almost tender. The valley stayed silent, but the snow shifted, ever so slightly. My name is Elias Moreau, wildlife biologist, graduate of McGill University, and for the better part of a decade, I've lived among predators. I've tracked wolves through snowstorms, set camera traps in swamps, and cataloged scat samples in heat that nearly peeled the skin off my back. Most people imagine the job as something heroic, adventure, wilderness, a rugged sort of romance. Truth is, it's long nights, endless solitude, and the gnawing ache of being smaller than the things around you. I was sent north in early May during the melt, when the rivers run black and swollen and the forest floor exhales a wet, rotting smell. The government had asked me to investigate reports that wolf packs were abandoning the Mont Tremblant region and heading further north, as if something was pushing them. Locals spoke of unnatural howls and shapes in the tree line, but in my field, legends and science rarely shake hands. My task was simple: observe, record, report. Still, even as I stepped out of the supply truck at the edge of the boreal wilderness, I felt it. The air itself felt tight, as if the trees were holding their breath. The driver, an older Cree man named Joseph, refused to linger. He left me with 2 crates of equipment, a canvas tent, and enough dried food for 3 weeks. Before he left, he muttered in French, "Don't follow the white calls." I almost asked him what he meant, but he was already turning the truck around, tires spitting gravel. The silence that followed was total, not the comfortable quiet of wilderness I'd known before, but a suffocating one. Even the river nearby seemed muted, the water sliding thickly over rocks as if reluctant to disturb the air. My boots sank in thawing soil, and the smell of resin and decay clung to me like a film. I chose a clearing near the abandoned logging cabins as my base. The structures leaned like drunks in the damp earth, their wood gray and pitted, roofs caved under decades of snow. I pitched my tent between 2 spruce trees, their needles dripping with meltwater, and began unpacking my gear: binoculars, notebooks, audio recorder, thermal camera. I was methodical, my mind fixed on schedules and data. Science doesn't bend for superstition. But that first night, something bent me. The fire crackled low, and the forest whispered with thawing life. My recorder picked up faint owl calls, the shuffle of small mammals, distant dripping water. I lay in my sleeping bag, headlamp casting a pale cone on the nylon ceiling when I heard it. A howl, long, sharp, piercing the night air like a blade. I sat up immediately. Wolves. That's what I was here for. The cry came again, but it was wrong, off-pitch, stretched, as if something was trying to sound like a wolf but didn't quite know how. The hair on my arms rose. I told myself it was distance distortion, the sound warped by valleys and fog. Yet the second time, I could swear it was closer. I stepped out into the cold, breath clouding. The fire had burned to embers, and the forest was drowned in fog so thick I could barely see beyond the tree line. Another call. This time, not from the valley, but from the ridge above the logging camp. I raised my recorder, pressed record. The sound quivered in the night, then cut short, as if it knew I was listening. For half an hour, nothing, just fog moving like ghosts between trees, the weight of silence pressing against my skull. Finally, I returned to the tent, telling myself it was just wolves with damaged vocal cords, an illness perhaps. But as I zipped the tent shut, a whisper slid through the canvas, so low I almost thought it was my own thought. Elias. I froze. My blood ran cold, and for the first time in years of field work, I felt genuine fear. Wolves don't speak names. I lay awake until dawn. Dawn didn't bring relief. It brought silence, the kind so deep it rang in my ears. Usually mornings in boreal forest are alive with chatter, warblers, jays, squirrels cracking spruce cones. But as I crawled from the tent, the air felt muffled, as if the trees themselves were holding something back. My boots crunched into frost, but beyond that, nothing. I checked the recorder. Battery fine, microphone intact. I rewound to last night's point of disturbance and pressed play. Static. A long hiss, then my name. Clear as glass. My own voice, but dragged through gravel as though I'd whispered into the recorder in my sleep. I threw the device into the dirt and cursed myself. Stress, fatigue, auditory hallucination. It had to be. But the rational explanation sat poorly, like a stone in my gut. By midday, I set out with binoculars, following wolf sign. A thin frost clung to shaded ground, but no tracks marked the soil. Not wolf, not deer, not even hare. Nothing moved in these woods. The smell was what got to me most, a damp iron tang, like old blood soaked into the earth. It seemed stronger near the abandoned cabins. One of the smaller cabins still stood with its roof intact. The door hung crooked, and moss crept up the walls. Inside, the air was sharp with mold, wood rot, and something else, an acrid musk that reminded me of predator dens. I swept my flashlight across the floor, empty beer cans, rusted nails, animal droppings, and then, near the back wall, carved into the boards, "Ni la Swiss pas, don't follow it." The words dug deep, gouged as if by someone desperate, pressing blade to wood with shaking hands. I traced them with my finger, the grooves damp with condensation. Whoever carved this had believed they weren't alone. That night, the calls came again, first far, then near, then circling the camp like a wolf pack on the hunt. But they weren't wolves. Each cry was too long, too human at the edges, as if straining vocal cords weren't made for howling. My heart beat against my ribs, adrenaline pumping. I wanted to believe it was an echo, but echoes don't shift positions so fast. I lit the fire high, flames licking orange into the mist. My training told me predators fear fire, but even as sparks rose, I felt watched. I kept glancing to the tree line, waiting for eyes to flash back at me. Midway through the night, I heard it again, my name. Elias. This time, not through the recorder, from the woods. Drawn out, syllables trembling like it had just learned to form them. I gripped the flare gun, every muscle locked. "Who's there?" My voice cracked in the fog. No answer, just a faint scrape of branches, like something tall moving slowly through spruce. I didn't sleep. By the third day, exhaustion gnawed at me. My field notes had devolved into scratches, my data sheets nearly blank. I couldn't shake the sense of a presence, always just beyond sight, always waiting for me to step into the trees. Still, I forced myself to set camera traps. Science, I told myself. Evidence would anchor me. I strapped one motion-triggered unit to a tree facing a game trail, another near the ridge where I'd first heard the false howls. The forest swallowed me in damp silence, each step sinking in black soil. As I returned to camp, I noticed something that stopped me cold. In the mud just outside my tent, a track. But it wasn't wolf, bear, or human. The print was elongated, heel deep like a man's, but the toes were wrong, too long, curling, pressed sharp into the soil. Only one print. No approach, no retreat, as if it had stepped there and vanished. I crouched low, heart hammering, staring at the impression. The mud around it glistened fresh. This had been made while I was gone. That night, I built the fire even larger, feeding it with cut logs until sparks hissed upward like frantic fireflies. The air smelled of sap and smoke, sharp in my lungs. I clutched the flare gun until my knuckles ached. The calls began again, but different now. They didn't circle. They came from every direction at once. Wolves, no, not wolves, crying in dissonant harmony, a chorus that bent the night. And between those howls, my name layered, distorted like multiple voices trying to speak in unison. Elias, come. My hands shook. I fired a flare into the trees. It burst red, hissing, the light casting twisted shadows. And for a fraction of a second, I swore I saw it. Pale, tall, slipping between trunks, its limbs too long for its body. The flare fizzled and it was gone. I stumbled back to the tent, barricading the flap with gear. Sleep was impossible. I sat clutching the flare gun until dawn smeared the horizon gray. When I retrieved the camera traps the next morning, my stomach dropped. The first unit by the game trail had captured only fog, frame after frame of mist curling like smoke. The second, near the ridge, had triggered at 3:14 a.m. One still image showed the tree line, nothing unusual, until I zoomed in. Between the spruces stood a shape, white, elongated, head cocked, almost human. Its face blurred, but I could see teeth, too many teeth, catching the glow of the infrared. The unit had recorded only that one frame before shutting off, batteries drained. I sat there in the dirt, camera clutched to my chest, breath tearing through me. The rational world I'd clung to was slipping, replaced by something older, something the locals had warned me about. La Chose Blanche, and now it knew my name. By the fourth day, I was unraveling. My hands shook when I wrote in my notebook, my words scattering into jagged lines that looked like someone else's handwriting. Every sound carried weight. A twig snapping could have been a moose, a squirrel, or it. The longer I stayed, the more the forest itself felt like a trap. I should have called for evacuation. My satellite phone was in the supply crate, a direct line to the research team in Montreal. But I kept hesitating. A part of me wanted proof. Not just for science, for myself. To know that what I'd seen in the infrared frame wasn't madness. That night, I kept the fire raging until sparks spun into the fog. I hadn't eaten more than a protein bar all day. My stomach clenched into knots. As the dark pressed in, I felt the weight of the woods like a lid over me. Then came the sound that froze my spine. Not a howl, not a voice, but footsteps. Soft at first, then deliberate. Crunching frost, squelching mud, circling the camp in wide arcs. My heart slammed against my ribs, ears straining. The fire hissed as a damp log collapsed, shadows leaping. Elias, the whisper came from behind me. I spun, flare gun raised, breath ragged, but there was nothing, only fog rolling low across the ground. Then the sound again, closer, layered. Elias, come. I fired the flare. It screamed red into the mist, searing shadows onto trunks. And there, just beyond the tree line, I saw it more clearly than ever. Tall, thin, a body like stretched sinew under pale skin. Its arms hung too long, fingers grazing the ground. The face, if you could call it that, was smooth at first glance, then rippled, features trying to form and failing. Its jaw clicked, lips tearing as it shaped words it wasn't made to speak. When the flare died, darkness crashed back, and the footsteps retreated. I didn't sleep. My pulse never slowed. Every minute until dawn was spent with the flare gun cocked and my body trembling, half waiting for the tent walls to peel open. Morning was no sanctuary. My eyes burned, my body hollowed by sleeplessness. I forced myself to analyze the camera trap images again, magnifying, comparing angles. The more I studied, the more convinced I became that it wanted me to see it. The battery drain, the single captured frame, it wasn't accident. It was bait. By noon, the silence broke. A howl tore through the trees, so loud it rattled my chest. It wasn't wolf, wasn't coyote. It was everything at once, layered calls overlapping until it sounded like dozens of throats tearing themselves apart. My skin prickled with animal terror. I stepped outside the tent, binoculars shaking in my grip. The fog thinned just enough for me to glimpse movement on the ridge. A white figure stood tall against the spruce, arms slack at its sides. Then, slowly, it raised its head. I swear it was smiling. I stumbled back, dropped the binoculars, and bolted to the supply crate. My fingers dug for the sat phone. It powered on, screen glowing faintly, then flickered, static lines crawling across the display. The battery bar dropped from full to dead in seconds. The device went black. I hurled it into the mud, bile burning in my throat. Whatever this thing was, it wanted me alone. That night, the confrontation came. The fire was nearly gone when I heard it. Soft at first, then louder, dragging, something heavy moving just beyond the circle of light. I gripped the flare gun, sweat freezing on my back. The dragging grew closer until I could see a pale hand slip from the fog, fingers curling in the dirt. I raised the gun. "Stay back!" My voice cracked. The hand withdrew only to reappear on the other side of the camp. Then another, behind me, then two more. My heart stuttered. There weren't multiple creatures, just one. It was fast, too fast. Then it spoke, right behind my ear, breath colder than the night air. "Follow." I spun, fired. The flare burst white hot. For an instant, the thing loomed above me, taller than the tent, jaw stretched open far beyond human limits. Rows of teeth spiraled down its throat. The light seared across its skin, blistering pale flesh. It screeched, a sound that made my vision blur, then vanished into the trees. The forest fell silent. My ears rang. My chest heaved. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about survival. It was hunting me for a reason, and I had no idea why. By dawn, the camp no longer felt like a camp. It felt like a cage. The fire pit was nothing but cold ash, my supplies scattered where I dropped them in panic. The tent sagged, nylon streaked with mud and claw-like drags I couldn't explain. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I kept replaying that moment, the flare bursting, the pale skin blistering, the mouth opening too wide. I told myself it had retreated, that maybe it feared fire. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. It hadn't feared the light. It had endured it, tested me. I couldn't stay here. The river wasn't far, a black, swollen vein cutting through the spruce. Downstream, the old survey maps showed a service road. If I could reach it, I might flag down a logging truck, or at least put distance between myself and the thing. I packed in silence, forcing numb hands to move. Dried food, water bladder, flare gun, three spare flares, the field notes. The sat phone was dead weight, but I strapped it in anyway. My recorder, too. If I died out here, at least there'd be something left. As I hoisted the pack, the silence broke. A sound drifted from the fog, soft, familiar. My own voice, "Don't leave." The blood drained from my face. The words came from the tree line, drawn out in a faltering mimic of my tone. Then again, closer, like a broken echo. "Don't leave, Elias." I bolted. The river was worse than I remembered, swollen with snowmelt, frothing black between jagged rocks. The air stank of iron and pine sap, spray misting my face. Crossing would be hell, but the thought of staying on this side was worse. I paced the bank, scanning for a shallow point. My boots sank into mud, my breath fogging the cold air. Behind me, the forest groaned, a tree creaking, a branch snapping. I spun, flare gun raised. Nothing, only the wall of fog pressing close. Then the howls began again, not distant this time. All around me, rising, layered, wolf and human, and something else that had no business making sound. My knees buckled at the weight of it. The fog trembled with vibration, my teeth chattering. "Go back," the chorus hissed. "Go back, Elias." I stepped into the river. The cold was instant, a knife to the shins. The current yanked at my legs, threatening to sweep me off balance. My boots filled, each step heavier, but I forced forward. I gripped a branch jutting from the bank and shoved on. Halfway across, I heard it, movement, fast and splashing. I whipped my head toward the sound. The fog parted just enough to show a figure stepping into the current downstream. White, tall. Its face bent and folded as if searching for mine. I stumbled, water surging up to my waist. My pack dragged me down. The flare gun shook in my grip. "Elias," it called, my name warping through water and air. "Stay," I fired. The flare hissed red across the river, light bouncing off the torrent. The thing shrieked, a jagged sound that split the sky. It stumbled back into fog, vanishing as fast as it appeared. I staggered onto the far bank, collapsing in mud, chest heaving. My skin was numb, soaked through, but I didn't stop moving. I pushed into the tree line, putting distance between me and the river. Every step felt like wading deeper into a trap, but at least it was forward. By late afternoon, the service road still hadn't appeared. My map said I should have reached it hours ago. The forest here felt different, denser, tighter, the fog thicker as if it clung to me alone. My compass needle jittered, refusing to settle north. And then I saw it. Not the road. The cabins. The same logging camp I'd left behind that morning. I froze, bile crawling up my throat. My tracks should have cut straight toward the road, yet here I was again, standing before the sagging roof lines and rotting walls. My tent was still there, collapsed, my fire pit cold. It wasn't possible. I staggered forward, desperate for proof. My own boot prints circled the camp in overlapping rings, dozens of them, as if I'd been walking in circles for hours. My pack slipped from my shoulders. My head spun. From inside one of the cabins, something shifted. Wood creaked. Then, clear as a bell, my voice again. Elias, inside. I stumbled back, heart rattling my ribs. The doorway gaped black. The air reeked of rot and musk. For a moment, a figure filled the threshold, white, tall, bent at angles, then gone. I clutched the flare gun like a lifeline, my breath rasping. I knew I should run, force myself into the trees again, but the weight of exhaustion pinned me. My legs trembled, my chest burned. That was when I noticed the carvings on the outside wall. More gouges, fresh, wood splintered clean. The same message as before, only deeper now, repeated over and over until the boards were nearly shredded. Ni la suis pas. Ni la suis pas. Don't follow it. My hand hovered over the letters. My skin prickled with the sense that whoever wrote this hadn't escaped either. The fog thickened, swallowing the cabins one by one. The air chilled, my breath pluming in frantic bursts. From the tree line came a low croon, almost soothing, almost human. Elias, home. And I realized it wasn't just hunting me. It was drawing me in. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to plunge into the forest, to keep moving until my legs gave out. But exhaustion had a way of twisting reason. And the way the fog pressed in, the way the trees loomed like walls, running felt impossible. The cabins stood in silence, crooked skeletons swallowed by moss and time. The closest door hung half open, the interior nothing but a black cut against the gray. I tightened my grip on the flare gun, pulse rattling through my wrists. Then the voice came again. Elias, inside. It wasn't the strained, broken mimic I'd heard before. This time it sounded almost perfect. My own voice, low, steady, beckoning like I was calling myself home. The ground tilted beneath me, my knees nearly gave. I tried to shake it off, fatigue, dehydration, fear, but the pull was undeniable. Step by step, I approached the cabin. The air inside hit me like a fist. Damp wood rot, animal musk, and something sharper, metallic, like iron left to rust. My headlamp beam cut across splintered boards and collapsed furniture. Rats skittered in the walls, their tiny claws scratching. And on the far wall, more carvings. Not warnings this time, not words, symbols. Jagged spirals, clawed loops, shapes that hurt to look at like they weren't meant for human eyes. My stomach clenched. Whoever or whatever made these, they weren't markings of desperation, they were instructions. Behind me, the door creaked. I spun, headlamp swinging, flare gun raised. The doorway was empty, yet the air thickened, pressing against my skin. My breath came shallow, chest seizing. Elias. The whisper came from above. I lifted the beam to the rafters, and there it was, hunched in the beams like some grotesque spider, limbs folded wrong, its skin slick and pale. Its head twisted, face half-formed, trying on expressions like masks. Eyes bulged open, black as pits, then blinked away, replaced with smooth flesh. Its jaw yawned too wide, teeth gleaming wet. The thing dropped. I fired instinctively. The flare screamed into its chest, exploding in a burst of red fire. It shrieked, a sound so high it split the air, and slammed into the wall, boards shattering. The cabin filled with smoke and burning fabric as the flare clung to its flesh. I stumbled back, coughing, eyes streaming. Through the smoke, I glimpsed its body convulse, bones snapping into new angles. The fire didn't destroy it. It reshaped it. The cabin shuddered as the thing lunged again. I barely rolled aside, its arms smashing through the floorboards where I'd been. Splinters tore into my leg, pain lanced hot and sharp. I scrambled, dragging myself toward the door, the flare gun clattering from my hands. Behind me, it screamed again, voice tearing like steel on stone. Elias! Not whispered now, not coaxing, commanding. I burst into the fog, lungs seared, leg bleeding. I ran blind, branches whipping my face, the world spinning in a haze of smoke and cold. My thoughts fractured. Keep moving. Don't stop. Don't listen. But the forest wouldn't let me go. The fog grew thicker, pressing against my eyes, filling my mouth with damp. Shapes moved in it, flickers of white, tall and shifting, never whole. Every few steps, my own voice called out ahead, behind, beside me. Here. Wait, inside. I crashed to my knees, chest heaving, mud soaking through my pants. My vision swam, ears ringing. I wanted to scream, to drown the voices out, but the weight of exhaustion crushed me. Then, through the fog, a shape emerged. Not the thing. A person. A man in heavy logging gear, face obscured by shadow. He stood near the edge of the old fire pit staring at me. My heart lurched. Someone, anyone. Help, I croaked, voice shredded. Please. The figure tilted its head, slowly, too slowly, and then it spoke. In my voice, don't follow it. The fog swallowed him whole. I stumbled back to the river by instinct, half dragging my useless leg. The current churned black and endless, whispering louder than it should. My reflection wavered in the water, my face pale, eyes hollow, and for a moment the reflection smiled. That was when I understood. It wasn't hunting me in the way wolves hunt deer. It wasn't chasing to kill outright. It was shaping me, pulling me closer, step by step, carving its way into my mind. The howls, the mimicry, the endless circling back to the cabins, they weren't mistakes. They were lessons. It wanted me to become part of it. The thought chilled me deeper than the river ever could. I pressed my palms to my skull, fighting the pull, fighting the urge to just give in and step into the water. Let the reflections swallow me whole. The air buzzed, my own voice rising in a chorus around me, dozens of versions of myself calling my name. Elias, Elias, Elias. I bit down until blood filled my mouth, anchoring me in pain. I forced myself to crawl away from the riverbank, back into the tree line, away from the water's draw. My flare gun was gone, but I still had the recorder. I fumbled it from my pack, clicked it on, the red light blinked, my voice shook. My name is Elias Moreau. If anyone finds this, don't come here. Don't answer it. Don't. A shadow moved in the fog. Tall, white, waiting. Don't follow it. The recorder felt heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have. My words bled into the static, swallowed by the night. I clipped it back to my pack, though I wasn't sure why. Some part of me still clung to the thought that evidence mattered, that if I died here, at least someone would know. But deep down, I wasn't sure anyone would ever find this place. The fog thickened again, curling against the trees like smoke. My leg throbbed with every step, each movement a battle to stay upright. Branches clawed at my jacket, the forest closing in as if it wanted me pinned here forever. Somewhere ahead, a shape glowed faintly through the mist. Straight lines, metallic edges. My chest tightened with sudden hope. The service road. I stumbled forward, half crawling, half dragging my body across the ground until my boots hit gravel. The road stretched pale and empty, vanishing into fog in both directions. My pulse thundered. If I followed it long enough, I'd find people. I'd survive this. But the moment I took my first step, the voices began again. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All in my tone, overlapping, some pleading, some mocking, some commanding. They rose from the trees, from the fog, from the ground itself. Elias, stay. Home. Don't leave. The sound pressed on me until my knees buckled. I clutched my ears, but the voices weren't outside anymore. They were inside, burrowing, splitting me apart. Through the roar of sound, I heard another noise, low, steady, unmistakable. Footsteps. I lifted my head. On the road, just ahead, a figure stood. Pale, tall, its arms hung low, fingers scraping the gravel. The fog clung to it like skin, blurring and reshaping its face until, for an instant, I swore I saw my own. It tilted its head, smiled. The voices cut off. Silence. Then, in my own voice, calm, patient, almost tender. Elias, come. My flare gun was gone. My body was broken. Every rational part of me screamed to run, but my legs refused. My chest ached with the pull of it, the terrible gravity of its voice. I forced my eyes shut, dug my nails into my palms until blood welled. I whispered through clenched teeth, the words carved into the cabin still burning in my mind. Don't follow it. When I opened my eyes, the road was empty. The fog had swallowed it whole. I stumbled forward, legs barely holding, moving blind into the white. The voices didn't stop. They never stopped, but they grew fainter, tangled in the trees behind me. My chest heaved. My vision blurred. I kept walking. I don't know how long. Hours, maybe. Days. Time doesn't mean much here. The fog never lifts. The trees never change. The road stretches on, endless. Sometimes I think I've escaped. Sometimes I hear my name whispered in the gravel. Sometimes I see footprints, too long, too wrong, walking just ahead of me. I keep recording. I keep walking. If anyone finds this, if anyone ever hears my voice, remember the carvings. Don't follow it, because it's still here, waiting.